Chapter 563. The strongest person in the palace, the bodyguard that Emperor Gu Qiuo relied on the most, had been killed in one move. Emperor Gu Qiuo's heart was bleeding, and he was terrified. How could a random disciple have such strength? Tianqing School was so strong? He realized that he had underestimated Tianqing School. To him, Tianqing School was a protective umbrella, but it was also a mountain pressing down on his head. Of course, more often than not, he thought it was a mountain pressing down on his head. He only knew that Tianqing School was very strong and was the overlord of this land, but he didn't know how strong it was. Zhang Xiu gave him the most direct feeling. Zhang Tianqi, who had been sitting calmly on the fishing platform, suddenly widened his eyes. A divine realm expert, someone who had just become an upper divine realm expert, had defeated an opponent of the same level with one move, and one who had cultivated a sword domain. Interesting, really interesting. I misjudged you. It turns out that you are a great expert. No wonder so many people believed you when such a ridiculous thing happened to you. A person who had been dead for more than 10 years had returned as a different person, and people still believed it. This was ridiculous in itself. Let me see what you are capable of. Zhang Tianqi stepped forward. He didn't want to avenge Commander Qi, but if Taihua sect wanted to take over Gu Qiuo, he wanted to show Gu Qiuo that Taihua sect had the strength to suppress Tianqing School. How did this happen? The internal official's face was pale. Looking at the corpse on the ground, he felt like he was dreaming. The majestic Commander Qi was killed just like that. Is Taihua sect a match for him? Everyone in Gu Qiuo was shocked. Zhang Tianqi said, "You are too vicious. You could have seriously injured him. Why did you have to take his life?" Zhang Xiu's eyes were cold. "I will kill anyone who insults Tianqing School." Looking at Zhang Xiu's emotionless eyes, Zhang Tianqi felt a chill run down his spine. This person's eyes were so cold that it was rare. A ridiculous thought flashed through his mind. Was he really Zhang Luoxia? Taihua sect, Zhang Tianqi. Zhang Xiu said, "Do you know the price of taking action?" When they heard Zhang Xiu's words, everyone could feel his arrogance even more directly. "You want to die too?" Zhang Tianqi was also infuriated. In the past, the disciples of the Taihua sect hated the disciples of the Tianqing School to the core, and they even had a trace of fear. This fear came from Zhang Luoxia. However, ever since Zhang Luoxia left the sect, especially after the Ji Dao sect took the disciples of the Taihua sect and used the Taihua sect to ascend to the throne of the sect master, the Taihua sect always had a sense of superiority when facing the disciples of the Tianqing School. The Ji Dao sect was inferior to the Taihua sect, and the Tianqing School couldn't hold its head high either. "Do you want to fight to the death with my Taihua sect?" Zhang Tianqi's eyes narrowed. He originally only wanted to defeat Zhang Xiu and teach Zhang Xiu a lesson. After all, the Tianqing School's sect master was their relative by marriage. So what if I am? Zhang Tianqi wasn't angry. Instead, he was happy. Good, very good. Clang. The sound of a sword rang out. The long sword rose into the air, releasing a dazzling radiance. The sword light was like a sun that illuminated the earth. Countless sword lights flew over, and with the point of his finger, they surged towards Zhang Xiu like a school of fish. Every sword light here contained sword intent, bringing with it a sharp sword chi that was almost tangible. Sword cultivators were one of the largest groups in the immortal martial continent, and they were also one of the strongest. This Zhang Tianqi in front of him was indeed an expert of all sorts. Zhang Xiu had only just made a move, and he had already discovered something fishy about it. His saber domain was practically ineffective against Zhang Xiu, and he could easily make the connection that saber domain was the bane of his saber domain. Therefore, he avoided the sword domain that was the nemesis of spatial laws. At this moment, his 1,000 years of cultivation was completely exposed. Kill him. Under the whistling of swords that filled the sky, the momentum was extremely shocking. Zhang Tianqi's cultivation was definitely at the peak of the heavenly immortal realm. The power of the sword light was obvious. The sword light was green, and the light was flickering, revealing a profound mystery. Taihua Shadow Sword. Zhang Xiu only glanced at it. He had studied this Tai Hua shadow sword before. It was an extremely perfect sword technique, and it was very difficult to find a flaw. It was a very mature sword technique that was widely spread in the Tai Hua sect. Many true disciples cultivated it because it was very powerful and easy to master. It could be said to be simple and crude. The person in front of him was much stronger than Zhang Xiu. In terms of magic power, Zhang Xiu was definitely not his opponent. He was only at the early stage of the upper heavenly immortal realm. Even if he took into account the advantage of his divine body, he was still much weaker than a peak upper heavenly immortal realm expert. He could only break the sword. Shadow was Yin. Where there was Yin, there was Yang. Although Zhang Xiu couldn't completely break the Tai Hua shadow sword, he could reduce its power greatly. Roar! With a whistling sound, Zhang Xiu's forehead flashed with a strong light. All kinds of talismans in his hand condensed into a long saber. The saber light was tens of thousands of feet long. Its power was far beyond the saber domain. The whole world was shrouded under the saber light. It was everywhere. Even the shadows under the roof tiles were illuminated by the saber light. All of a sudden, the tsunami-like sword light seemed to have lessened by quite a bit. Everything that was under the shadow had disappeared. What? Zhang Tianqi didn't have time to react. Zhang Xiu's long saber was already whistling towards him. He snorted coldly. Zhang Tianqi was very confident in his own strength. Unless he was a great heavenly immortal, ordinary peak upper heavenly immortals were no match for him. He even dared to fight a great heavenly immortal. Bang! The long saber slashed down. All the sword light danced in the sky as if it was solid. It was like a wooden stick sweeping into a school of fish. The fish all avoided it. What? Who won? Many people couldn't see it clearly or understand it. Everyone was very eager to see Zhang Tianqi defeat Zhang Xiu in a second, just like how Zhang Xiu defeated Commander Qi. At this moment, the light exploded to the peak. They saw Zhang Tianqi retreat from the light. His eyes narrowed into a line as he stared at the light. No, this is impossible. No one has ever broken the Tai Hua shadow sword. Without the world's law, Zhang Xiu couldn't break it. However, once he had the world's law, he could shine his saber light wherever he wanted. A drop of bright red blood flowed from his wrist and slid down the long saber. Impossible. But in that moment, he clearly felt that his sword light's power had been reduced by more than half. He thought it was an illusion, but when he clashed with Zhang Xiu's knife light, the knife light's power was not strong, but it easily broke his sword spell. He could tell that Zhang Xiu had broken the Tai Hua shadow sword. Zhang Tianqi's face was ashen. It turned from green to white, from white to red, and from red to black. There was actually such a genius in the world. One had to know that even Jiang Luoxia couldn't do this. When Jiang Luoxia killed his way to the Tai Hua sect, many sword techniques were broken. However, the Tai Hua shadow sword wasn't broken. Since then, the Tai Hua shadow sword became more and more popular in the Tai Hua sect. It even became a trend. Anyone who could afford it would spend the time to learn this sword technique. The world also had a high opinion of this sword technique. However, he didn't expect that it would be broken today. Moreover, it was broken by a nameless brat. However, before he could even think about it, Zhang Xiu's long saber had already charged out of the light. Zhang Tianqi swung his sword to block it. Due to the fact that he had been severely injured in their first exchange, Zhang Tianqi no longer had the slightest advantage in his heart, even if his cultivation level was several levels higher than Zhang Xiu's. Zhang Tianqi's 3 junior brothers and sisters were in disbelief. This Tianqing school disciple was only an early-stage upper heavenly god. How could he suppress their senior brother, who was at the peak of the same level? This was simply unheard of. Weren't divine cultivators the ones who were extremely untalented and couldn't cultivate immortality? Everyone in the ancient palace was stunned. They really didn't expect this Tianqing school disciple's cultivation to be so high. Just now, they all saw the blood flowing from the saber. It wasn't Zhang Xiu's blood, but the incomparably powerful Zhang Tianqi's. The blood flowed from his wrist. Who won? Who won in the end? The emperor of the ancient palace became very nervous. If the people of the Tai Hua sect were defeated, he couldn't believe that the Chenqing school would punish the ancient palace like this. Fine sweat appeared on his forehead. The internal official on the side was also stunned. Now that he thought about it, he was really scared. Just now, he was so disrespectful to Zhang Xiu. Chapter 564. Why? The more Zhang Tianqi fought, the more shocked he became. He felt like he was bewitched or met a monster today. Why is every sword technique broken? Meanwhile, his junior brothers and junior sisters beside him were already stunned. How could this be? That junior sister cried out involuntarily. If they hadn't seen the situation in front of them with their own eyes, they would never have believed that someone could break senior brother Zhang's sword art in a high-speed battle without any time to think about dodging. Senior brother Zhang's sword art was directly broken without any hesitation. Monster, a monster of the age. Emperor Gu Qiuo and the people around him felt a chill down their spines when they saw the jaws of the Tai Hua sect's exalted immortals drop to the ground. They could see that exalted immortal Zhang was completely suppressed by his opponent, but they didn't know that this was the result of the battle. Pfft. Blood spurted out as Zhang Tianqi was hit again. How could this be? Even the sect master can't break all the sword techniques of the Tai Hua sect. Is there really such a monster in the world? Zhang Xiu was indeed a monster, but not to this extent. He could break Zhang Tianqi's sword technique instantly because he had been to the Tai Hua sect in his previous life. He didn't dare to say that he could break all the sword techniques of the Tai Hua sect, but he did break most of them. In other words, Zhang Tianqi's sword technique had already been broken by Zhang Xiu. However, Zhang Tianqi was scared out of his wits. Pfft. He was hit again. At this moment, his mind was in a mess and he had lost all confidence in winning. He could only resist instinctively and hold on for the honor of the Tai Hua sect. Pfft. Blood spurted out again. Some of the people in the ancient cottage couldn't bear to watch any longer. It was simply a slaughter. Every time Zhang Xiu slashed down, it felt as if Zhang Tianqi was going to die under Zhang Xiu's blade, but he still managed to avoid being hit in the vital areas. Senior brother Zhang. In the blink of an eye, Zhang Tianqi's body was covered in wounds. His blue robe was stained with blood. Be it gods or immortals, blood was the foundation of life. Once their blood ran out, they would die. If you beg me, I'll let you go. Zhang Xiu's voice rang out in the hall. In your dreams. Then die. Suddenly, Zhang Xiu's forehead flashed once again. A powerful force surged out, and the speed of the saber qi suddenly increased. In fact, Zhang Xiu's mastery of the saber technique was pitifully low. At this moment, he didn't have any saber technique, but only one word, fast. When the law of the world enveloped him, the fierce law of heavenly fire gushed out along with the wind's stillness. Then, the blade flashed. It was unknown whether it was because he was burned by the fire or because of the wind's stillness, but in the end, the blade flashed past his body. A line of blood appeared on his body. It started from his forehead and didn't stop there. You got what you asked for. Zhang Xiu stood there, and so did Zhang Tianqi. He didn't move, but his body emitted a gurgling sound. Then, blood spurted out from his body. Senior brother Zhang. Senior brother Zhang. The disciples of Tai Hua sect all shouted. Their faces were filled with shock, fear, and anger. Their senior brother Zhang struggled to lower his head. He wanted to see what happened to his body, but when he lowered his head, his body separated into two halves and fell to the ground. There was no sign of life. Hiss. Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. Dead. Senior brother Zhang. Several junior brothers and sisters went over, but the ground was a mess. The person on the ground did not have the slightest bit of life force. Dying like this, it was absolutely impossible to save him. You! One of the disciples pointed at Zhang Xiu angrily. You dare to kill a disciple of Tai Hua sect? Zhang Xiu glanced at him indifferently. Aren't you talking nonsense? I've already killed him. The 3 disciples in front of him were also true disciples of Tai Hua sect. However, they were still young and inexperienced. Not only do I have to kill them, I have to kill all of them. He had long disliked the people of Tai Hua sect. Suddenly, the saber in Zhang Xiu's hand turned into a saber. His cultivation level was lower than Zhang Xiu's, so it took him a little effort to deal with it. However, the 3 disciples in front of him were just juniors. Even if their cultivation levels were higher than Zhang Xiu's, it was still limited. Under the circumstances of the same cultivation level, most of their sword techniques were seen through by Zhang Xiu. How could they be a match for him? Oh no! With a shout, the saber light brought Zhang Xiu forward. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, Zhang Xiu's saber had already slit the throat of one of the cultivators. His saber intent and saber chi pushed forward and a head flew up into the sky. It was a fatal move. He knew that his sword technique had been broken by me, but he still used it in a moment of life and death. How stupid! There were only 2 kinds of people in a moment of life and death. One was calmer in the face of death, while the other was flustered and at a loss. This disciple was the latter. If it were anyone else, they would only have one choice when their sword technique was broken. As the saying went, random fists can kill a master. Abandoning all sword techniques, they would compete to see whose sword was faster and fiercer. It was simple and violent. However, this disciple chose to use the most powerful sword technique. He was simply courting death. The other 2 disciples were even more frightened when they saw their comrade killed in one move. They couldn't even withstand a single strike. At this moment, their first reaction was to run away. Let's go. On this mission, not only did they have to gather Gu Qiuo, but they also had to take on another mission, which was to kill a disciple of Qianqing school. Senior brother Zhang knew the background of this disciple very well. Although they didn't know much about it, they now understood why the sect wanted to kill him. Such a monster. He was simply the second Zhang Luoxia. No, he was even more terrifying than Zhang Luoxia. Roar! The sound of a spell rang out. If it was only a matter of body movement, Zhang Xiu certainly wouldn't be inferior to them. However, when the sound of the spell rang out, the 2 disciples couldn't help but pause. This pause gave Zhang Xiu enough time. Poof! The light of the blade passed through the disciple's body and hit the palace at the far end in a flash. The whole palace was cut open from the middle, revealing a gap about half a meter wide in the middle. The disciple fell from the sky without even having time to scream. Another one killed. As for the other person, he looked back in horror and cried out loudly. His cultivation was clearly around the same level as his. Why? Why was he being crushed by the other party as if he was chopping melons and vegetables? At this moment, he actually had the awareness of death. If you kill me, the Tai Hua sect won't let you go. My master won't let you go either. The last thing he saw was a dazzling light falling from the sky like a guillotine. In the blink of an eye, 3 true disciples of the Tai Hua sect were killed by Zhang Xiu, including Zhang Tianqi from before. If this scene was seen by knowledgeable self-cultivators, their eyes would definitely pop out of their heads. But even if they didn't understand and couldn't see such a profound battle, Emperor Guzhou and the others were already dumbfounded. Are they all dead? Emperor Guzhu's pupils contracted as he looked at Zhang Xiu. His face was pale, and cold sweat kept coming out of his forehead and slipping down his cheeks, but he didn't know how to wipe it away. Silence. A deathly silence. Everyone's feet seemed to be nailed to the ground, but they were also trembling. Do you still remember what I said just now? Emperor Guzhou shook his head hard. The dead bodies on the ground showed how terrifying the person in front of him was. The flowing blood was even more shocking. Gulp. Emperor Guzhou swallowed a mouthful of saliva with difficulty. At this moment, he already knew that misfortune was coming. He had made a big mistake, and the price he had to pay for this wrong choice was not something he could bear. If there was medicine for regret, he would even swallow the bottle. I will continue to pay tribute to the Qianqing school, not a single cent less. No, I'll add more. I just beg Immortal, don't kill me. Zhang Xiu stared at him coldly. I said, those who insult the Chenqing school will be killed without mercy. Hearing this, Emperor Guzua seemed to have lost all his strength. He couldn't stand any more and fell to the ground. Although there were many guards around, none of them could help. This was the power of the Chenqing school. Chapter 565. Everyone had a forbidden zone in their heart. The Chenqing school was Zhang Xiu's forbidden zone. It was his reverse scale. Dragons had reverse scales. Those who touched them would die. It was the same for Zhang Xiu. The glory of his life was all because of the Chenqing school. His master-disciple relationship with his master was also because of the Chenqing school. His brotherhood with many fellow disciples was also all because of the Chenqing school. He would not allow anyone to insult the Chenqing school, especially in a country that was so lowly that it needed the protection of the Chenqing school. He was even more unworthy and even more unworthy. No, you can't kill me. If you kill me, you won't be able to complete the Chenqing school's task. You will be punished. Zhang Xiu's cold face and eyes were even colder. This time, he came out with no intention of completing the task. The Ji Daozong sent him out not to complete the task, but to kill him. However, the Ji Daozong would never have thought that a person who had just entered the upper divine realm could kill 4 divine immortals of the Taihua sect, including Zhang Tianqi, who was infinitely close to becoming a great divine immortal. The Taihua sect should have sent a great divine immortal. However, if they sent a great divine immortal, it would seem like they were deliberately trying to kill Zhang Luoxia. Great divine immortals were not that cheap to deal with a problem at the level of Gu Quo. They could only send a few divine immortals to deal with it. If they encountered Zhang Luoxia by chance and then had a conflict, it would be an accident. The Ji Daozong wanted to kill Zhang Xiu, but he was afraid of being accused of killing Zhang Luoxia. Things could easily go wrong. Most of the time, it was not that the arrangements were not meticulous enough, but that they were often too meticulous. The more one thought about it, the more accidents there would be. The inch light flashed across the sky in an instant. With a whoosh, it was as if the air was wailing. The blade chi seemed to be chasing after the inch light, but it was so sharp that it separated everyone present. Blood splattered everywhere. Emperor Guzua fell into a pool of blood, along with everyone around him. Even the palace he was in, which covered several miles and was no smaller than the forbidden city on earth, collapsed with a loud bang. It was as if the entire palace had been forcefully demolished. It caved in at a speed visible to the naked eye, and dust filled the air. Since you're not willing to obey Tianqing school, then disappear. Amidst the ruins, Emperor Gu Quo saw the destruction of the palace and the massacre of everyone. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His eyes were filled with anger, fear, helplessness, and deep regret. How stupid was it to humiliate a tyrant like Tianqing school? And the price was to bury everything. He was dead, the imperial palace was destroyed, and there were foreign enemies. One could imagine what the future of Guzua would be like. It was only a matter of time before it was destroyed and annexed. Perhaps at the beginning, the people still remembered the Guzua imperial family, but after decades, hundreds, or even hundreds of years, no one would remember. Guzua would become history, buried in dust and forgotten in a corner. Why? This was his last thought. He was unwilling to accept it, but it was too late for regrets. However, that person flashed with this light. Like a flying knife shot out by Zhang Xiu, he shot straight into the sky and landed on his airship. He had to leave as soon as possible. 4 Taihua sect disciples were killed. Of course, they knew that it was Zhang Xiu who did it. Soon, they would send a great heaven immortal to hunt him down. Now, the Taihua school had enough reasons and excuses. Zhang Xiu killed their people, so they could certainly hunt him down without any scruples. They didn't care if he was Zhang Luoxia or not. Western Zhou. That was where Zhang Xiu wanted to go, and when he had nowhere else to go, Western Zhou became Zhang Xiu's first choice. There, he could find a few Heaven's Inquisition stones and solve some of the mysteries surrounding Xieting. Therefore, he adjusted the direction of the airship and flew to the west. In the Taihua school, a middle-aged man stood up angrily from his seat. What? Zhang Tianqi and the 3 disciples he sent were all killed by that person from the Tianqing school. It's true. Even the ancient palace was destroyed. The middle-aged man's face darkened. Could it be that the news is wrong? That he's not just an upper celestial immortal? Jiang Yan, who was sitting next to him, said, "Definitely not. I saw it with my own eyes at the Tianqing school. He's only a lower celestial immortal. It's already a miracle that he could become an upper celestial immortal in one go. He must have gotten some good fortune. It's impossible for him to break through again. Even if he's Zhang Luoxia, he's not. Then what's going on? Tianqi's cultivation is very close to great celestial immortal. He only needs a few more opportunities to break through. It's not easy for the school to cultivate such a disciple." Jiang Yan said, "No matter what the reason is, whether it's an accident or a trap, the most important thing right now is to kill this person and wash away the shame of the Taihua school. It's also to clear away the obstacles in the Tianqing school for my cousin and brother-in-law. If even Tianqi is no match for him, then we can only send a great celestial immortal." At the great celestial immortal level, even in the Tianqing school or the Taihua school, they were already outstanding figures. Asking them to kill a small fry would be a lowering of their status. Fortunately, that kid was extremely talented. The joy of killing a top genius was no less than killing a famous master. Jiang Yan said, "It's just that it's boring for us to chase after him. He killed a disciple of the Taihua school and even destroyed the ancient palace's royal family. Such a monstrous disaster. Shouldn't the Tianqing school send someone to deal with him?" "Yes, notify the Tianqing school." Not long after, a man dressed in black and shrouded in a cloak walked in. He folded his arms and saluted. "Schoolmaster, you called for me?" Yi Pingfeng, Zhang Tianqi was killed by a new genius from the Tianqing school. Take a few people and kill him. Remember, this person is a bit evil. Don't underestimate him because of his low cultivation level. The middle-aged man sitting at the top said, "Yes." The man slowly raised his head. His face was faintly glowing with a golden light. His skin was so white that it was almost transparent. It was as if the golden light was shining from under his skin. As soon as he stepped out of the main hall, a stone flew through the air. However, when the hard stone was about to hit him, it turned into sand and flowed down when it came into contact with the golden light flowing on the surface of his body. A beautiful figure walked out from the back door of the main hall. "Yi Pingfeng, are you going to chase after Jiang Xiu?" "Greetings, miss." She waved her hand and said, "No need. Answer my question." Yi Pingfeng said, "Yes." Hearing this, her face became gloomy and she said, "Very good. Take me with you. I want to see his bones turn to dust." There were rumors in the sect that she was rejected by the Tianqing school. Yi Pingfeng was a bit troubled. It wasn't a big deal to take a young miss with him on a sect mission. However, he had to take care of her along the way. This young Mrs. Temper wasn't something that ordinary people could stand. "What, you dare to disobey?" Yi Pingfeng said helplessly, "Okay." He had also thought of bringing a few disciples with him. Now that he had reached the level of great celestial immortal, even though he still couldn't compare to a celestial king, he could still take in disciples, and have his disciples spy on this little ancestor. Otherwise, if things really got out of hand, he really wouldn't be able to handle it. Very good. The young girl was very satisfied with Yi Pingfeng's straightforwardness. "Jiang Xiu, you're dead for sure this time." Soon they set off. According to the news, Jiang Xiu was escaping towards the west. As long as he was within the borders of Qingzhou, there would be spies from the Taihua sect. It would be best to stop Jiang Xiu before he escaped from Qingzhou. Jiang Xiu stood on the flying boat and looked at the clouds in front of him. Suddenly, some images flashed through his mind. He saw himself being stopped by a man in a black cloak and some disciples of the Taihua sect. Zhang Xiaoyao was beside him. "Will I be caught?" He looked at the scenery behind him. It seemed to be Wuxi City, and it was not far ahead. Jiang Xiu immediately changed his escape route and went in the other direction. Then, he focused again. He realized that before he could escape from Qingzhou, he would have to face the pressure of the Tai Hua sect's spies. However, you have spies and I have the minor fate technique. He once again saw himself being stopped by the people of the Tai Hua sect, so he changed his direction again. Strange. On the large flying boat behind Jiang Xiu, Yi Pingfeng said in surprise, "He seems to know where we are and keeps avoiding us. What's going on? It's really a little strange." Chapter 566. There were different grades of flying boats. Their size was more important than their flying speed. What was more interesting was that the bigger the flying boat, the faster it would fly. Jiang Xiu had chosen a small boat this time, not because he wanted to, but because he had chosen a large boat, which revealed his intention to escape from the sect. It seemed like he was going out to do something with a light carriage. The disadvantage of the flying boat's slow speed was soon revealed. After changing positions continuously, Jiang Xiu could not shake off the other party and was firmly stuck. Images of him being intercepted kept appearing in Jiang Xiu's mind. The black-cloaked man's aura was very powerful. If he was not mistaken, he should be a great heaven immortal. Jiang Xiu wasn't surprised that the other party seemed to be able to discover his position. Within the borders of Qing province, especially from the ancient hut to the west, passing through the territory of the Tai Hua sect, there should be many spies of the Tai Hua sect. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Xiu had traveled hundreds of miles. However, not only did he not widen the distance between them, but he also got closer. Jiang Xiu's expression turned cold. According to the current situation, it was only a matter of time before he was stopped, especially when Jiang Xiu's minor fate technique was still in a state where it was sometimes ineffective. If he was really stopped, his chances would be very slim. Thinking of this, Jiang Xiu decided to take a risk. He took out a red talisman. Jiang Xiu had specially prepared these talismans to escape when the Day Order Dao sect or an immortal king attacked him. This was a special fire escape talisman. Coupled with a fire escape technique that only the sect master of the Qianqing school could cultivate, he could escape tens of thousands of miles away in an instant. It was an extremely domineering escape technique. Once the escape technique was used, the fact that he was under the river would be confirmed. This kind of talisman and escape technique could only be cultivated by the sect master. However, he had no choice but to use it now. Fortunately, there was no one around him now, and they couldn't see what kind of escape technique he was using. However, his sudden disappearance would always lead people to daydream. In addition, this escape technique had side effects. It would overdraw the user's body. If it was a celestial being, they would need to recuperate for at least a few years to recover their vitality after using it. However, Jiang Xiu now had a divine body, so the effect of using celestial techniques would definitely be much weaker. Jiang Xiu slapped his own body, and his entire body was instantly set ablaze. From the inside out, the flames instantly burned out, engulfing Jiang Xiu. Then, even the flames disappeared. Jiang Xiu had already used an escape technique to escape. Among the many escape techniques in the Qianqing school, the most powerful one was only cultivated by the sect master. Among them, the metal escape was the most powerful. Among them, the fire escape was the most powerful. Logically speaking, the wind escape should be the fastest. However, the Qianqing school didn't have the wind escape. This was also a characteristic of immortal cultivation. They learned all kinds of celestial martial arts, regardless of whether they were suitable or not. As long as they were powerful, they would learn them. After cultivating the fire escape and knowing that the metal escape was faster, they would comprehend the related Great Tao. Celestial martial arts could be compatible with all things. On the other hand, celestial martial arts were more limited. However, they could reach the extreme in a certain aspect. Under the fierce fire escape, Jiang Xiu felt that he was moving forward at an extreme speed. It even exceeded the limits of his body's endurance. However, the pain only lasted for a moment. However, at this moment, Jiang Xiu felt as if his body was hollowed out. Yi Pingfeng's speed suddenly increased. It's just ahead. From afar, they had already seen the flying boat. Zhang Xiaoyao was so excited that her delicate body was burning. That scumbag Zhang Xiu was finally going to fall into her hands. She had been looking forward to this day for a long time. Zhang Xiu, where do you think you're going? Zhang Xiaoyao roared at the flying boat. Her aura was very terrifying. Beside her, Yi Pingfeng's clothes fluttered. Behind him stood more than a dozen disciples. Each of them had a dignified appearance and a murderous aura. Something's not right. Yi Pingfeng's gaze flickered. Why isn't the flying boat moving? In the blink of an eye, their flying boat had already arrived beside Zhang Xiu's flying boat. The flying boat was not big. It was like a small boat on the bank of a river in the mortal world. It was parked there quietly. However, there was no one on the flying boat. Where is he? He disappeared? Yi Pingfeng suddenly pulled off the hood of his cloak, revealing a head of shiny golden white hair. Impossible. The flying boat just stopped. He can't have escaped from my perception range. Indeed, the flying boat stopped in the blink of an eye. Zhang Xiaoyao leaped over and landed on the flying boat. The flying boat was very small. There was not even a place to shelter from the rain. At a glance, she could see that Zhang Xiu had really disappeared into thin air. There's a burning aura. She sniffed with her small nose. Yi Pingfeng also appeared on the small boat. His finger touched the place where Zhang Xiu was standing just now. Any escape technique that had just been used would definitely leave behind traces. Especially the fire escape technique. At this moment, not only was there a burning aura in the air, there was also a residual heat left in the air. Escape technique. What a powerful escape technique. Yi Pingfeng naturally felt humiliated that Zhang Xiu had escaped from under his nose. He was furious. However, he could not help but admire that an Empyrean god could actually escape from under his nose. Especially this escape technique. We let that bastard escape. Yi Pingfeng said. Don't worry. Even if he escaped, he will definitely die. Not only our Tai Hua sect wants him dead, but his sect, Qianqing School, will also not tolerate him. He already has nowhere to run. Zhang Xiaoyao said, he might not return to Qianqing School. He might escape from Qingzhou. Escaping from Qingzhou is inevitable. Yi Pingfeng said. However, escaping from Qingzhou does not mean escaping to heaven. The sect said before that if he escapes by the time we arrive, the sect will pay for the reincarnation palace to kill him. Zhang Xiaoyao said, the assassin organization, the reincarnation palace. Yes, the experts on the reincarnation ranking are all over the immortal martial arts. Once a kill order is issued, no one has ever lived for more than 13 days. The immortal martial arts was really too big. Although Tai Hua sect was a big sect, its influence was limited to Qingzhou. Outside of Qingzhou, it was somewhat beyond its reach. Especially now that they did not even know where Zhang Xiu was, hiring an assassin was the easiest way. Zhang Xiaoyao said, that's a good idea. He's just a small Empyrean god. We don't have to spend much money. However, if he dies like this, wouldn't it be too easy for him? Yi Pingfeng's heart chilled. This woman in front of him was really not someone he could afford to offend. Even death was not enough. She even felt that it was too easy for him. He said, the reincarnation palace only kills, never captures. Zhang Xiaoyao said, we can capture him. Hearing this, Yi Pingfeng fell silent. He was a dignified great celestial immortal. He was also a figure in Tai Hua sect. It was indeed shameful for him to let a true disciple of Qianqing School escape from under his nose. It might be easier if I go after him myself. Zhang Xiaoyao felt that something was wrong. You want to leave me behind? No. Yi Pingfeng said, that will greatly slow down my speed. It's okay, we can take it slow. Yi Pingfeng said, the reincarnation palace's kill order is never issued more than 13 days ago. It might be even earlier. If we want to personally kill Zhang Xiu before they do, I'm afraid it will be difficult. No, you have to take me with you. Somewhere in the west of the immortal martial arts, Jiang Xiu's escape technique had already returned to his usual speed. However, he lost control of his body. Immediately, a flame flashed and a light shield emerged from his body. It instantly condensed into a thick layer of light shield in front of him. With a loud bang, Jiang Xiu crashed heavily into a mountain rock. Boom! Under the intense pressure, the light shield formed by the heavenly fire laws turned into specks of fire and shattered. Jiang Xiu felt intense pain, his entire body almost falling apart. He had used the heavenly fire escape technique countless times, but this was the first time he was in such a sorry state. He rolled down with the rock in pain. Fortunately, no one saw. Otherwise, I would have lost all my face. As expected, divine cultivators who used immortal techniques were punished by the heavens. However, just as Jiang Xiu was rejoicing, he saw two streaks of light flying over from the distant sky. He was shocked. Unless it was an immortal king, there was no way they could catch up to him. However, he quickly rejected this possibility. There were two female immortals in the sky. One was dressed in white, the other in black. They were currently fighting, and the battle was extremely fierce. With a boom, the two of them fell from the sky at the same time, landing not far from Jiang Xiu. The two of them struggled to sit up at the same time, but in the end, they spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood. Then, they could no longer hold on. Su Ying, you witch. Today, I will definitely kill you. Bai Qianqian, don't think that just because you're dressed in white, you're an orthodox immortal. You self-proclaimed righteous sects are all thieves and prostitutes in private. The two of them also noticed some strange movements. They looked over with difficulty, only to see an unfamiliar man in the same situation as them. No, he was even more miserable than them. His clothes were tattered. In the situation just now, his clothes had long been torn out of shape, hanging on his body like strips of cloth. His hair was also very messy, and his eyes were somewhat dazed as he looked at them. Who are you? The two of them asked at the same time. Is it that witch? Is it that bitch? Her accomplice? Jiang Xiu thought, what does it have to do with me? I'm just a bystander. He said, no, I'm just passing by. That's great. The one in black said, kill her for me, and I'll give you whatever you want. Don't listen to her. She's a witch, a bad person. Chapter 567. While the two women were quarreling, the rock beneath them suddenly collapsed again after a violent crack. Instantly, the two women screamed as they fell down. As for the culprit, Jiang Xiu, he certainly didn't expect this to happen. The rock he shattered would cause the mountain to collapse. The two women who fell, no matter how high their cultivations were half dead. Su Ying, you witch, are you dead? If I die, you won't live long either. Bai Qianqian felt her life force slowly disappearing. It couldn't be helped. Immortals also cultivated from mortals. If they bled too much, they would die. It was the same for Su Ying. She also felt that her life might end here. All the glory and wealth would be buried with the passing of her life. Originally, falling from the cliff wasn't a big deal. But before this, the two had fought for a day and a night, crossing thousands of miles. The magic power in their bodies was almost exhausted, and their injuries were abnormally serious. After such a fall, they also suffered external injuries. If they didn't have any external injuries, they could slowly recover and escape. But blood kept flowing out, and they couldn't recover at all. Unless someone helped them stop the bleeding at this time. Bai Qianqian said, isn't there someone up there? You're so naive. Do you think that a mountain savage can help? Su Ying's voice was pleasant and crisp. Now that she was injured, it was even softer. Shout. I don't believe he'll climb down the cliff to save us. Bai Qianqian said, Su Ying, you're smart. Why don't you shout? At this time, the two of them were very weak. Whoever wasted more energy shouting would die sooner. Then let's wait for death here together. You'll definitely die before me. After that, the two of them didn't speak. They just wanted to see who would die first. Until death, the two of them were still fighting fiercely. Suddenly, a voice sounded. Are you guys dead? What do you mean by are you guys dead? Do you really want us to die? However, the two of them were very happy to hear Jiang Xiu's voice. They didn't care about these things. But the two of them held it in. Neither of them responded. It was too difficult to shout back. You all fell to your deaths? Forget it. I wanted to come down and save you. If no one came down to save them at this time, they would definitely die here. However, neither of them was willing to suffer a loss. They felt that whoever shouted out would lose. They held it in and looked at each other. By Qianqian, if we don't make a sound, we'll all die here, the black-clothed Suing said. What? Are you scared? I'm afraid that you'll die before me. Bai Qianqian laughed coldly, but her pale face revealed her hesitation. She was unwilling to die like this, so she said, I'll count to 3, and we'll shout together. Suing mocked. So you're the one I'm afraid of. Are you going to shout or not? Shout. 1, 2, 3. Help. All of them were shouting themselves hoarse. Who didn't value their lives? Jiang Xiu said, Wait here, I'll come down. He began to slowly climb down. His body was overloaded, and he couldn't use his divine power. Climbing down was the same, but it would take a bit more time. After about a quarter of an hour, Jiang Xiu climbed to the bottom of the cliff. Looking down, he saw the two women lying in the chaos with their clothes stained with blood. Save me! Jiang Xiu walked over. Bai Qianqian was closer to him, so he took the lead to reach her side. Only then did Bai Qianqian see Jiang Xiu's appearance clearly. His hair was disheveled, and his clothes were ragged. He actually looked like a mountain barbarian. You're seriously injured. Bai Qianqian was incomparably weak at this moment. After waiting for Jiang Xiu to come down for a while, she had lost a lot of blood. If it wasn't for her high cultivation, she would probably have died. It's okay. As long as you can help me stop the bleeding, I can live. Save me. Jiang Xiu glanced at Su Ying, who was at the side. This woman had a charming face. Bai Qianqian. Su Ying. These two names were a bit familiar. He must have heard them before. The two women were both peerless beauties. One was elegant and refined, while the other was enchanting and charming. Help me stop the bleeding. Su Ying blinked at Jiang Xiu. Her eyes were very bright and big, like black gems. They were very attractive, and her charm was very attractive. Jiang Xiu said awkwardly, If I stop the bleeding, it's inevitable that there will be skin-to-skin contact. Don't worry, you're saving us. We won't blame you. Bai Qianqian said. Right. Su Ying agreed. Jiang Xiu said, No. Why not? The two women were extremely anxious. They saw that their blood was about to dry up, but they couldn't get angry, because only Jiang Xiu could save them. If they angered him, he would ignore them. You're a doctor now. You don't have to worry about saving people. Yeah, we don't care. Being seen and erased by others was also for the sake of survival. In front of life, the body was just a bag of skin, nothing else. Don't you women value your reputation more than your life? You'd rather die than let others touch you. The two women were embarrassed. How could it be the same? That was when the man wanted to force himself on them. Of course, the woman would rather die than submit. But now, they were asking you to save their lives. It wasn't anything, but if they said they were willing, it would seem very licentious. We are immortal cultivators. We are different from you mortals. We don't care about the mud and complicated formalities. Su Ying said. Yes, yes, yes. Bai Qianqian agreed, secretly despising her. As expected of a witch. So shameless. She could even say such things. Jiang Xiu said, But I'm not an immortal cultivator. This sentence almost angered the two women to death. Are you even a man? We don't care, So why are you still hesitating? Su Ying was really angry. Bai Qianqian also expressed her disdain. Zhang Xiu said, "This isn't a matter of whether I'm a man or not. This is a matter of principle. I won't do anything too intimate with a woman who has nothing to do with me. I'm a clean freak." "Then what do you think we should do?" Zhang Xiu pondered for a moment, then said, "This is indeed a bit difficult for me, but I can't just watch you die. We have nothing to do with each other, so we can form a relationship. If I do something intimate, I feel like I should take responsibility." The two beauties understood. In the Wind Province, many men dreamed of marrying them home. It seemed like this brat was coveting their beauty. Men were all like this. The two cursed him in their hearts at the same time. Bai Qianqian was so angry that her pale face was about to turn green. A mountain barbarian wanted to taint her Bai Qianqian. A cold glint flashed through Su Ying's beautiful eyes. At this time, Zhang Xiu spoke, "I'll save whoever is willing. I won't save anyone who isn't willing." Sinister. Very sinister. Su Ying clenched her teeth and said, "All right, I agree. Save me." Zhang Xiu was happy when he heard this. This girl's figure and appearance were undoubtedly the best in the world. What was even rarer was that she was born with a brow bone. She might even have a special constitution. Many cultivators dreamed of dual cultivation with her. All right. Bai Qianqian felt that something wasn't right. If Su Ying survived, she wouldn't even need to bleed dry. She might even kill her. It would be too unfair to die in her hands. She bit her plump lips and said, "I agree too." Zhang Xiu was even happier. This Bai Qianqian had a delicate face. She was beautiful and refined. She was the kind of girl who looked like a fairy. She was the kind of girl who made one's eyes feel clean. She was simply a clear stream in the world. "Can you do what you say?" "Of course." Zhang Xiu said, "Then swear." The two girls were stunned. They were both planning to go back on their word. If they swore, it wouldn't be good. Some oaths couldn't be broken, or else bad luck would befall them. "We swear." Zhang Xiu said, all right, I trust you." Bai Qianqian and Su Ying's names were really familiar, but he couldn't remember them all of a sudden. "Then after I save you, you'll be my maids." "What? Maids?" The two girls, who were originally weak, almost jumped up from the ground. Weren't they wives? How did they become maids? What kind of joke was this? It was already degrading to be wives, and now they were going to be maids? "You want me, Su Ying, to be your maid? You want me, Bai Qianqian, to be your maid?" Zhang Xiu said, "Why? Are you going back on your word? Do whatever you want. Anyway, your lives are your own." All right. You win. Hurry up and stop the bleeding. If it continues, we'll die. Chapter 568. Zhang Xiu took a closer look, picked up a few medicinal herbs, put them in his mouth, chewed, and then applied the medicine on them one by one. The two beauties frowned, thinking that his saliva was also in the medicine. They felt a burst of discomfort, and it was directly applied on their skin. There was nothing they could do. In order to survive, they could only grit their teeth and let Zhang Xiu do what he wanted. First, they had their clothes pulled off, which was already very painful. Now, they had to endure his saliva. At this moment, the treatment was like living in an abyss of suffering. What was even more embarrassing was that they were being taken advantage of by him. Their skin was soft and white. The moment he pulled off their clothes, it was extremely moving. The two beauties were like petals swaying in the wind and rain, trembling slightly. If it weren't for their wounds and blood, it would be even more moving. But when Zhang Xiu applied the medicine, it felt very comfortable. Su Ying, a naturally seductive beauty, couldn't help but let out a sound of agreement. Bai Qianqian's furrowed brows also relaxed, as if she was completely relaxed. What kind of medicine is this? Zhang Xiu actually didn't know much about medicine. It was mainly because of the green divine light of life. Although it was at a very early stage, it could still treat external injuries. I just made it casually. It should be quite effective. Jiang Xiu said, in the future, remember to use the word, sir, when you speak. Su Ying and Bai Qianqian were quite angry. He really did put on airs. Jiang Xiu asked, this is the Wind Province? If you don't know, why would we be here? Jiang Xiu couldn't explain it to them. He could only guess from the distance and direction that they were in the Wind Province. Jiang Xiu reached out and slapped Su Ying's butt, saying, is this the attitude you should have when speaking to the sir? Su Ying was stunned. She was a demoness who killed without batting an eye, yet she was actually slapped on the butt. Her pale face became red, and she was so embarrassed that she couldn't control herself. Seeing this, Bai Qianqian couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. Her eyes narrowed into crescents. The next moment, Bai Qianqian's brain felt as if it had exploded. She suffered the same treatment. It hurt a little, but what was more intense was the feeling of numbness. There was also an indescribable sense of shame in her heart. The dignified Bai Qianqian had actually been struck in the buttocks. Su Ying also covered her mouth and snickered, but she felt that something was wrong. When the sandpiper and the clam fought, the fisherman would benefit. She was also bullied. Therefore, the two women glared at Jiang Xiu, the initiator of all this. He was just short of scolding them. Hooligans. Young master, right? May I know young master's name? Jiang Xiu said, Jiang Xiu, Jiang as in rivers and Xiu as in cultivation. I'm from Qingzhou. Jiang Xiu. The two women looked at each other and shook their heads. They had never heard of any of them. At first glance, they were also nobodies. Jiang Xiu disagreed. Do you have a place to stay? You guys are seriously injured. You need to rest. Su Ying nodded and said, it's not far from here. There's a branch in the Cold Mountain Plum Manor. We can go there. Cold Mountain Plum Manor? You're from the Su family? Jiang Xiu finally remembered why Su Ying's name sounded so familiar. Cold Mountain Plum Manor. The Cold Mountain Plum Manor that loved plum blossoms. Then the one in front of him was one of the 50 beauties on the Immortal Martial Immortal Charm painting. However, the Cold Mountain Plum Manor was one of the few demonic sects that enjoyed a great reputation in the Winzhou. What, now you know to be afraid? Would young master be afraid of a maid? Su Ying angrily pursed her lips. In Jiang Xiu's opinion, there were no demons in this world. Everything was done by the human heart. In the cultivation world, people killed people. It was just that people were stronger and killed more fiercely. Perhaps their cultivation methods were more harmful to others for their own benefit. In addition, they were labeled as demonic by the sects of the Winzhou. Bai Qianqian said, which? What about you? Bai Qianqian replied, West Sword House, Bai Qianqian. The West Sword House was filled with female sword cultivators who cultivated in seclusion. Many of them would never marry or find a Dao partner. The female disciples of this sect were all responsible for helping the common people of the world. They were very simple and poor. No wonder the two of them were sworn enemies. Jiang Xiu said, all right, the bleeding has stopped. You have a place to go. Young master, I'll be leaving first. The two girls were astonished. They thought that Jiang Xiu would stick to them. Why was he leaving? You're leaving? Where are you going? Jiang Xiu said, I'm running for my life. If I'm not mistaken, I should have been ordered to be killed by the Reincarnation Palace. So I can't stay here. I have to quickly escape. What, the Reincarnation Palace? The two girls looked at each other. That was one of the few assassins in the Immortal Martial Sect. It was said that the Reincarnation Palace never killed people for more than 13 days. In other words, the man in front of them who saved them would not live for more than 13 days. How could this be? You? Jiang Xiu laughed coldly. From the beginning to the end, his long hair covered his face. They were not able to clearly see Jiang Xiu's appearance. Remember, you owe me a life. One day, I will make you pay. After saying that, Jiang Xiu sensed a formidable killing intent closing in on him. An old man appeared above the cliff. Behind him was a pair of dazzling wings of light. Zhang Xiu exclaimed inwardly, "How fast!" Zhang Xiu suddenly shot towards the distance. Although his body was still in a difficult state, it would be too late if he did not leave now. The moment he flew out, the person on the cliff reached out from his sleeve and slapped the air where Zhang Xiu was. Hong! A huge force immediately slammed into Zhang Xiu's back across the air. Great celestial immortal! The two girls looked at each other again. If they were not injured, they could have saved Zhang Xiu. But now, they could only watch helplessly. Zhang Xiu flipped his palm. Facing the palm of a great celestial immortal, he could not dodge at all. Moreover, from the other party's light wings and the fact that he was the first to find him, he should be a great celestial immortal at the peak of the heavenly wind Dao technique. His speed was extremely fast and there was no way to dodge. He did not hesitate and immediately took out the second fire escape talisman and used the fire escape heavenly technique. That person was obviously very confident in his methods. He did not immediately rush over. Instead, he waited for Zhang Xiu to be defeated. But what he saw was Zhang Xiu's entire body burning up. With a whoosh, he disappeared without a trace. He was shocked. His figure blurred and with a whoosh, he stood at the place where Zhang Xiu's flames were about to disappear. His speed was really shocking. But after grabbing at the flames, he did not grab anything. Looking left and right, Zhang Xiu's figure strangely disappeared without a trace. How is this possible? Not only him, but the other two girls were also extremely shocked. The man with the light wings closed his eyes. After a while, he chased towards the west, leaving the two girls behind. Suing said, "Why does Zhang Xiu's technique look a bit similar?" "Impossible. Absolutely impossible." Bai Qianqian said, "What are you trying to say?" "The secretary of Qianqing School, the fire escape heavenly technique." "Are you kidding? He's a god. How can he cultivate immortal techniques? Moreover, it's the ultimate immortal technique that only the sect master of Qianqing School can learn." Zhang Xiu's second use of the fire escape heavenly technique was not as simple as simply overloading his body. The burden on his body had reached the point where it could be counted as his lifespan. "Do you think he can survive?" Bai Qianqian shook her head. "Once the Reincarnation Palace has issued a kill order, it has never exceeded 13 days. The record of 13 days was a celestial king. Moreover, he's just a nameless brat." Suing said, "But I, Suing, never owe anyone anything." Bai Qianqian's eyes dimmed. When Zhang Xiu reappeared, he was on the surface of the sea. Fortunately, he did not crash into a mountain this time. Instead, he slowed down and regained control of his body. "It's the sea." The fact that it was the sea was good news for Zhang Xiu. He was heading in the right direction. According to the records, the Western Zhou Kingdom was located on the other side of the sea. Legend had it that the god of Buzhou stood solemnly in the sea. The sea, which was originally filled with howling winds, flashing lightning, and rumbling thunder, became peaceful because of his presence. The best way to avoid being hunted by the Reincarnation Palace was to enter the sea and then head west in a straight line. At this moment, Zhang Xiu's physical condition had become very poor. If not for his divine body, he would not have been able to use the fire escape heavenly technique a second time. The recovery time was too short. However, he deliberately suppressed his realm last time, which gave him a good opportunity. As long as he broke through his realm, his body would be able to recover quickly. Now, he had to find a place. A ship. He saw a huge ship. The cruise ship on Earth was not even 1/10 as big as this one. Looking down from above, it looked like a giant beast lying on the surface of the sea. It happened to be a ship heading west. He could use this seat to break through his realm and escape. Chapter 569. From the fact that Zhang Xiu and the others were traveling on flying boats, it was obvious that most of the boats on the sea belonged to ordinary people. Even the cultivators were of a lower level. There were many people on the boats. Not only were there warehouses, there were also many rooms for resting. After finding a set of clothes to change into, he immediately entered a room. He guessed that it was probably an empty room. There were no bedding or luggage inside. He placed a seal on the door and hurriedly began to cultivate, intending to break through to the next realm. The sea was very calm today. The boat was also very stable and didn't feel any bumps. However, its speed was far from being comparable to that of a flying boat. Of course, this kind of boat didn't only rely on the wind or manpower to move. It also used spirit stones. Therefore, it was much faster than ordinary boats. Its speed was very close to that of high-speed trains on Earth. A few days ago, Jiang Xiu had already reached the limit of the early stage of the higher heavenly god realm. He was worried that his speed would be too fast and too conspicuous, which helped him achieve his goal today. After cultivating for a while, the blood and qi in his body began to surge. Although it was very painful to overload his body, after his blood and qi surged, his attention was completely focused. If he was distracted during a breakthrough, it would cause his realm to be unstable. Last time, he was disturbed by someone and almost couldn't enter the Tianqing school. The blood in his body seemed to be boiling, constantly emitting popping sounds. His divine body also emitted a red light. Suddenly, he was about to break through. He didn't want to rush up like he usually did. Of course, it was no problem when his divine body was at its peak. However, after being seriously injured, if he tried to break through to the next realm, his blood and qi would surge in reverse and he would die. Therefore, he took it slowly, breaking through bit by bit. In the immortal martial continent, the number of immortal cultivators was much higher. One of the most important reasons was because of the uniformity of immortal cultivation. The immortal physiques of all immortal cultivators were roughly the same, and the secret arts of all sects were all interlinked. However, it was different for gods. There was a huge disparity between the different races of gods. Many of the gods cultivated the inheritances of their own race, and if they were to cultivate the inheritances of others, they might not be able to do so, or the effects would be greatly reduced. If it wasn't for the great god sealing technique, Jiang Xiu wouldn't have been able to cultivate so quickly. Moreover, all he knew were immortal techniques. There were very few divine cultivation techniques. Other than his 2 talents, it could be said that he didn't have any. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so difficult to deal with the pursuit. He had the secret cultivation techniques of the Tianqing school. The barrier of his cultivation base was on the verge of being broken. Every single one of his blood cells was on the verge of bursting and the minute amount of power within them began surging out. In the past, Jiang Xiu had not noticed it. Now, however, Jiang Xiu noticed that every single one of his cells had become even more minute as his cultivation base increased. Boom! Jiang Xiu's entire body seemed to explode, and the awakened power in his surging blood rushed out. His entire body emitted a dazzling red light, illuminating the entire room. Jiang Xiu's entire person was like a deity that had arrived, shining with boundless radiance, mysterious and unfathomable. He felt his body recover in an instant. Moreover, the divine power in his body suddenly increased. Not only did it increase in strength, the total amount also increased. He broke through. Mid-stage upper celestial god. Who? Breaking through became the best way to heal his injuries. In addition, he discovered that the recovery ability of his divine body was indeed stronger than that of immortals. If a cultivator encountered a similar situation, it was almost impossible to rely on their own body. They would have to rely on spiritual pills and miraculous medicines. Reincarnation Palace. An assassin organization that covered the whole martial immortal continent. Under the leadership of the king of the Tao of Slaughter, the whole martial immortal continent feared them. However, the price was ridiculously high. Most of the time, the price was unbearable. He didn't expect that they would accept his order. Presumably, it was because he was still a heavenly god. Jiang Xiu had come into contact with the Reincarnation Palace a little. It was a remnant of a mysterious country. That country used to be strong for a period of time. They had a tradition, and that was to select the most outstanding children to enter the Reincarnation Palace. They would use a secret technique to cleanse their bones and cultivate them into the personal guards of the sage. However, after the sage was killed and the country collapsed, they became wandering ghosts. Later, a supreme elite appeared and gathered them. The funny thing was, their enemies were annihilated by another force before they could take revenge. They disappeared in the vast history. The supreme elite, who had nowhere to vent his hatred, vented his anger on everyone. They formed an assassin organization, and named it the Reincarnation Palace. Zhang Xiu had seen that supreme elite once. It was when they were fighting over the egg of a saint beast. At that time, although Zhang Xiu had some fame, his strength was still very weak. Thus, he could only look up to him. His name was Dong Wujuan. Back then, that mysterious country was located in the east. Ever since their saint monarch was killed, they no longer had a monarch. Therefore, they called themselves the Dongwu Army to commemorate their lord. This Dong Wujuan was known as the King of Assassins. He walked the Tao of Destruction. His cultivation was frighteningly high. Even the immortal kings of various sects would pale when they talked about him. Even more mysterious was that the Reincarnation Palace's Dong Wujuan had a secret technique passed down. That was to find people. No matter where you were, he would be able to find you. This was even faster and more accurate than Mr. Fool's Dragon Headless. However, he would only kill and not search. Because of the existence of this secret technique, Zhang Xiu knew that the next person to hunt him down would be coming soon. It was really troublesome to be targeted by the Reincarnation Palace. Zhang Xiu had no choice but to escape. What made Zhang Xiu even more uncomfortable was that this matter had no end. He really couldn't understand why the Reincarnation Palace would accept such a mission. What was the sense of accomplishment in killing a heavenly god? He knew that his cultivation speed must have attracted the other party's interest. The sense of accomplishment in killing such a genius was definitely not inferior to killing a famous expert. After thinking about it, Zhang Xiu took out a silver piece of paper. The paper was made of mithril. He drew a talisman on it. Of course, this was also an immortal technique. Originally, he wasn't interested in these things. It was his master who forced him to learn them. He said that if he wanted to become a sect leader, he had to be all-round. He held it in his hand and softly chanted an incantation. Then, he threw it forward. After the talisman flashed, a silver light flashed out. The light actually transformed into a mighty silver-armored man. Then, he sat down cross-legged on the seat Zhang Xiu was sitting on. Zhang Xiu smiled. His figure transformed into a wisp of smoke and flew out of the ship. He flew far away. The speed of his escape technique was at normal speed. It was a bit strenuous to fly directly on the sea. Now that he was running for his life, he couldn't care less. Not long after Zhang Xiu left, a white-clothed woman appeared in the sky. Her gaze fell on the ship and she smiled coldly. With a whoosh, she appeared in the room where Zhang Xiu was just a moment ago. Almost without any hesitation or nonsense, the Zhongguang in her hand had already slashed at the silver-armored man sitting cross-legged. When the long sword touched the silver-armored man, her expression couldn't help but change. She felt a strange power on the sword. She saw that the air pressure formed by the long sword had already dispersed the silver-armored man like light sand. The surging power inside burst out with a loud bang. She had never thought that she would encounter such a situation. The power that was surging towards her was simply unimaginable. Her beautiful face turned pale as the arm that was holding the sword was directly blown apart. Half of her body was also blown apart. Her entire body was blown away by the powerful force. My hand! My hand! She howled painfully on the ground. This explosion shook the entire ship violently. The ship almost capsized. It alarmed the people on the ship and they all rushed over to check. Zhang Xiu was flying at high speed. The corner of his mouth raised into a cold smile. If you want to kill me, Zhang Luoxia, you have to pay the price. It's a pity that you're not a great celestial immortal. But a great celestial immortal wouldn't be injured to this extent. When the Samsara Palace encountered a counterattack, its usual strategy was to use explosion to counter explosion. It was inevitable that more great celestial immortals would be dispatched. Zhang Xiu would be hunted down even more fiercely. This was only the first day. Then let the storm come more fiercely. Just then, Zhang Xiu inexplicably felt that in the depths of the vast sea, there was a strange power calling to him. At first, he didn't pay attention to it. But as he continued to move forward, this call became very strong. It was as if there was a very familiar existence waiting for him. Chapter 570. The news of their pursuit of Zhang Xiu kept coming back to the Samsara Palace. They had already fought with their target Zhang Xiu twice, but failed both times. The first time, an assassin at the level of a great celestial immortal slipped away right under their noses. The second time, an assassin at the level of a great celestial immortal was seriously injured and his immortal body was destroyed. This completely infuriated the Samsara Palace. The assassins of the Samsara Palace were infuriated. Even as Zhang Xiu was getting the feeling that there was something calling out to him from the other side of the ocean, he was shocked to find that a great Yao had appeared. They had appeared without making a single sound, and yet, they stirred up wild winds and roared as they charged toward Zhang Xiu with murderous intent. Zhang Xiu's eyes turned cold. He stared at the approaching great demon with a solemn expression. Judging from its terrifying aura, it was very close to the level of a great celestial immortal. Demons were more difficult to deal with than immortals. They were also called demon gods. Because their bodies were stronger than gods, their strength was much stronger than other beings of the same level. Roar! It was a pitch-black demon with the body of an ox. A gust of wind was surging under its feet as it leaped over from the distant horizon in a blur. This demon raised its head and emitted waves of black flowing light. Chi! The ripples swept over. When it was close to Zhang Xiu, a black hurricane of several hundred feet in length gushed out from a trembling rune. It was going to swallow Zhang Xiu. Zhang Xiu's expression changed. He slashed with a long saber in his hand. The long saber went through the hurricane, but the hurricane did not slow down. When he saw this, his hands changed rapidly. He had no choice but to display his immortal technique again. A few mysterious yellow runes flew out, looking mysterious. As these runes gushed out, rays of yellow and golden light flashed on Zhang Xiu's body. It expanded against the wind. When it came into contact with the runes, it expanded to a height of several hundred feet. It was in the shape of a mountain. Huff, huff, huff. The black wind whistled and continuously slammed into the mountain. As the wind continued to increase, the mountain continued to grow in size. The collision between the two emitted a dense sound of blades slamming into rocks. Once again, the great demon was able to form wind blades under the suppression of its magic. Under the crisp and dense collisions, the rocks of the mountain were continuously shattered. The shattered rocks fell into the sea and disappeared without a trace as soon as they touched the surface of the sea. Seeing this, Zhang Xiu's face turned grim. This great Yao's strength had exceeded Zhang Xiu's expectations. There was no time for him to think too much about it. He changed the hand seal in his hand and flicked his finger towards the sky. Immediately, a golden light descended from the top of the mountain and a sharp light enveloped the entire mountain. The wind blades once again struck the mountain, but they were all blocked by the golden light on the surface of the mountain. Roar! The great demon in the distance flashed and the surrounding air began to distort. Suddenly, it appeared in front of Zhang Xiu. The spear in its hand pierced through the air with a sharp sound. It was about to stab Zhang Xiu. However, a strange scene appeared. Zhang Xiu didn't move and let the spear pierce through his body. But then, Zhang Xiu's body became blurred. Finally, after a squirming of space, it disappeared. What was left was only an afterimage. Humans might not be able to do it. Most cultivators would practice eye techniques because of their own limitations. However, great demons were different. Their eyes were different. The so-called illusion technique couldn't deceive their eyes. This was the result of Zhang Xiu's rich battle experience. Seeing that it was just an afterimage, the great demon realized that it had been deceived. It suddenly felt a powerful aura in the sky. When it looked up, it saw Jiang Xiu descending from the sky. His hands were alternating rapidly, forming runes one after another. There was no time for it to dodge. The runes carried an incomparably heavy force and pressed down on its head. Roar! A deep roar rang out. The great demon whose head was pressed down screamed in pain. Its body trembled violently as it desperately tried to break free. However, it was useless. Suppress! With a loud bang, the runes burst out with an incomparably dazzling earthy yellow light. Ripples of light spread out as if the surrounding forces were focusing on it. The great demon was crushed and sunk into the sea, spurting out water. Jiang Xiu raised his eyebrows. He realized that he was wrong. Although it was a great demon of the sea, it had nothing to do with water. He made another hand seal. Buzz! Flames surged out from the runes. This time, Jiang Xiu did not need to awkwardly use an immortal technique. Instead, he directly used his heavenly fire law. The flames suddenly sank into the great demon's body and finally disappeared without a trace. In the next moment, the great demon's body suddenly stopped struggling. Jiang Xiu smiled ferociously. Although it was not bad and was much stronger than other great demons of the same level, it encountered Jiang Xiu, who had an unusually rich combat experience. It immediately fell into his trap. Otherwise, it could have lasted a few more rounds. Jiang Xiu exerted force in his palm and turned his body upside down. With a flip, he turned into a ray of light and flew away. He did not look at the great demon again. However, the great demon's body burned and fell piece by piece onto the sea. A bright inner core was also thrown in the direction of Jiang Xiu. He caught it in his hand. I should be able to sell it for some money. Less than 15 minutes after Jiang Xiu left, several great demons were left at the place where they had fought. However, the great demon's body was still burning and floating on the sea. He's dead. They had rushed over when the fight started. However, they were killed in such a short time. They did not even see the shadow of their opponent. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Didn't they say that he was only an upper-level heavenly god? Of the three killers, the first was escaped by Jiang Xiu, the second was seriously injured by Jiang Xiu, and the third was directly slaughtered by Jiang Xiu. The price that the Samsara Palace had to pay was far more than what they gained. In other words, the Samsara Palace had suffered a huge loss in this deal. At this moment, it was no longer about profits. It was about glory and dignity. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Jiang Xiu increased his speed to the limit. He wanted to get out of this sea area as soon as possible. Moreover, he deliberately flew higher, away from the sea surface. Some schools of fish at the bottom of the sea were very good at monitoring people above them. Moreover, the methods that fish schools used to transmit information were unimaginably brilliant. Just now, Jiang Xiu sensed a powerful aura behind him. It should be the killers of the Samsara Palace. Most of the tribes at sea had an astonishing number of people. They liked to appear in groups. He had to leave quickly. However, his goal was resolute. He flew all the way west. He felt a strange force calling out to him in the west. He even vaguely felt a sense of familiarity. This feeling became more and more intense as he went west. Of course, Jiang Xiu had been here in his previous life. However, as the high and mighty suzerain of Qianqing School, he did not care about the people below at all. Suddenly, he saw an island in his mind. To be more precise, it was not an island, but a continent. Its area was definitely not smaller than Hua. There were broken palaces everywhere. There were also natural mountain rocks and some strange stones. These stones were full of strange talismans. This is talismans from the longevity stone talisman? They were very similar, too similar. However, there were too many of these stones on the continent. He saw many children and adults who liked to write talismans on the stones and pray to the heavens. This is the heaven-seeking talisman on the longevity stone talisman. However, it is not the talisman on deity Buzhou. It is written by ordinary people imitating the talisman to pray for blessings. However, this must be the place where deity Buzhou fell. It must be the western Zhou country that Shangguan Zhaorong mentioned. Since they are all imitations, they are not the real heaven-seeking talisman. However, what he saw must be the western Zhou country, the place where deity Buzhou fell. The huge body collapsed, and even the sky collapsed. It must be there. Zhang Xiu could feel that it was calling out to him. However, at this moment, a strange force appeared in the sky. A huge hand that covered the sky stretched out from the clouds and pressed down on Zhang Xiu. This is the immortal king. Zhang Xiu was incomparably shocked. The reincarnation palace had actually sent out an immortal king to deal with a puny heavenly god. They were really shameless. Chapter 571. A gigantic hand stretched out from the sea of clouds, bringing with it the might of the heavens, giving people an incomparable shock. No matter how fast Zhang Xiu was, he was firmly enveloped by it. Moreover, the gigantic hand continued to press down on him, unable to evade. As soon as Zhang Xiu made his move, he could feel that it was the attack of an immortal king. Moreover, he had locked onto Zhang Xiu's position from thousands of miles away. This kind of spell that could cross space was an extremely mysterious secret technique called the Outer Six Directions Secret Technique. The so-called six directions referred to the north, south, east, west, and up. Even ordinary immortal kings couldn't do it. The Samsara Palace was determined to take Zhang Xiu's life. It was no wonder that the Samsara Palace had sent 3 divine immortals to deal with a mere divine immortal. One of them was dead and the other was injured. They had lost all their face. If they didn't kill Zhang Xiu immediately, they wouldn't be able to vent the hatred in their hearts. Humph. Zhang Xiu definitely couldn't fight against the immortal king face to face. The immortal king could directly crush the current Zhang Xiu with a flick of his finger. However, he was casting the spell from thousands of miles away and had no medium. He could only rely on the great Tao of space. Since he couldn't escape, Zhang Xiu wanted to see if the laws of his world could interfere with him. Hong! A strong light flashed on his forehead as he spat out an incantation. At the same time, his body flew across the sky like a bird. In the distant sky, a rising sun slowly rose. A world that belonged to Zhang Xiu descended. An invisible world enveloped over and covered the entire sea. Meanwhile, the giant hand in the sky had already descended with a loud bang. Bang! A loud sound cut through the sky. The sea of clouds in the sky shook violently. The air waves pressed down, and even the sea waves surged. However, Zhang Xiu's figure was still flying inside. His speed was so fast that it seemed to have caused the space to distort. On a certain mountain peak, a middle-aged man in white robes sat with his eyes closed. A sound of bewilderment came from his nostrils. Anyone who saw this scene would be stunned. The spell actually missed. The attack just now actually didn't hit Zhang Xiu. A long-distance locking spell would definitely not miss, and under the envelopment of the Immortal King's spell, it was even more impossible to break free. This was simply unheard of, but it really happened. Impossible. Zhang Xiu's eyes flashed with a terrifying coldness. His fighting spirit burned fiercely. Just as he expected, the laws of the world could indeed break through the locking spells. Even if it was an immortal king, at that moment, there was a gap between the two worlds. As a result, the immortal king's attack missed. Bang, bang, bang. The giant hand in the sky launched 3 consecutive attacks, unceasingly trying to grab Zhang Xiu, who was flying. Zhang Xiu was like a little bird trying to escape from the hunter's grasp. Every time the hand grabbed him, the entire sea surface would explode, making a loud rumbling sound. Every time the hand grabbed him, it would slow down by half a second, and Zhang Xiu would be able to dodge the fatal blow just a little bit faster. A long-distance locking spell, especially one that was thousands of miles away, was indeed related to the great Tao of space. Under the interference of Zhang Xiu's world laws, there was a spatial dislocation. Every time, the spell couldn't hit the target. No matter how powerful the spell of an immortal king was, even if it could destroy the world, as long as it couldn't hit the target, everything was useless. How could this be? From thousands of miles away, even an immortal king couldn't see the specific situation. He could only use one eye to sense or even a kind of mystic light technique in his mind. If he was in the situation himself, he would understand that Zhang Xiu was using the laws of the world. The laws of the world were too rare. In everyone's impression, they only existed in legends. Many people, even immortal kings, had never seen the laws of the world before. Zhang Xiu had never seen them before. Very few people could comprehend time and space, let alone fuse time and space. The middle-aged man in white on the peak suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He had really seen a ghost. No matter what, he couldn't hit the target. While he was shocked, he also felt very embarrassed. An immortal king actually couldn't do anything to a mere heavenly god. If this spread out, he wouldn't be able to survive. Humph. No matter how you avoided the secret technique of the outer 6 directions, since that's the case, I, the immortal king, will use the secret technique of ignoring the 6 directions. The mystic light was straight. Just as he was about to cast the spell, he suddenly saw flames suddenly burning from the body of Zhang Xiu, who was flying at high speed. In an instant, he was swallowed by the flames and disappeared in a flash. The mystic light technique couldn't track this speed. He saw Zhang Xiu suddenly disappear in the mystic light. When he wanted to lock onto him again, he actually didn't know where he was. Zhang Xiu escaped from under the eyes of an immortal king? With a whoosh, the white-robed man suddenly stood up. He didn't dare to believe that a mere heavenly god actually escaped from the hands of an immortal king. The disciples behind him said, "Thank you, Master, for your help." They didn't know what had happened. They thought that their master stood up because the problem was solved. However, their master didn't respond for a long time. He just stood there, his face terrifyingly gloomy. "Master, what's wrong?" The muscles on the middle-aged man's face were twitching. He didn't want to admit it, but he had to say, "He escaped." What? The disciples behind him were also stunned. They looked at each other in disbelief. "How is that possible? He's just a heavenly god." The middle-aged man said, "He is indeed a heavenly god. However, this person is definitely not an ordinary heavenly god. No wonder 3 people failed in a row. He should count himself." Including him, there were a total of 4 people. The Samsara Palace had lost all its face this time. From the position, he should be heading west. At this moment, the sky was slowly darkening. It was almost night. The Reincarnation Palace had an unwritten rule, which was that they didn't kill at night. Perhaps they also wanted to show the strength of the Reincarnation Palace. They didn't kill at night. They used their strength to crush you. Of course, Zhang Xiu also knew this rule. He could finally rush on with peace of mind. However, he didn't slow down because the strange feeling in front of him that kept calling out to him was getting stronger and stronger. It seemed that he was almost there. This was the 3rd time he used the fire escape heavenly technique. The burden on his body didn't decrease at all. Instead, it felt heavier. It seemed that his divine body rejected this immortal escape technique. As the number of times he used it increased, the negative effects on his body would become stronger. However, it was still okay on the sea. He didn't crash into a mountain like the first time. His body was very weak and still faintly hurt. His divine power was almost exhausted. He dragged his broken body and flew all the way. Not long after, night fell. The starry sea was frightening. There wasn't a trace of light. Everywhere was dark and chilling. He could only follow his intuition and head west. He guessed that the place calling out to him must be the Western Zhou Kingdom. If he followed his intuition, he wouldn't be wrong. Zhang Xiu was no stranger to rushing through the night. Before he ascended the throne, he was also very fierce. It was common for him to chase people or escape. The divine body's divine power recovered quickly. Once an immortal's Dharma power was exhausted, it wasn't easy to recover. However, the divine body's divine power recovered very quickly. This was the great advantage of a god. Although he felt tired, his body was still able to take it. After an unknown period of time, Jiang Xiu flew for an unknown number of miles. He saw land on the distant coastline. It was a vast land. The feeling was like looking down at the earth from the sky and seeing bright lights. "We're here." Jiang Xiu felt a little excited. After he got close, the strange calling disappeared. He flew into the land in a flash. He saw towns and mountains. This should be the Western Zhou Kingdom. It was located in the middle of the sea. If he didn't know the location, it would be difficult to find. He had a feeling that this land was right in the middle of the sea. Does the Samsara Palace have assassins in the Western Zhou Kingdom? Jiang Xiu didn't have much time. He looked at the full moon in the sky and saw that it had begun to set. It should be the latter half of the night. It was impossible to break through the realm in such a short time, especially if he wanted to deal with the Samsara Palace. 1 or 2 small realms didn't make much of a difference unless he became a great celestial immortal. He had prepared the corresponding resources, but the problem was that he didn't have a law that could be completed. He placed his hopes on his natal divine weapon. As long as his natal divine weapon underwent a qualitative change and completed the first step, he would have a chance to become a great celestial immortal. But the problem now was where to get the heaven-questioning stone talisman. Chapter 572. When he entered the city, most of the buildings had already turned off their lights. The nightlife on the immortal martial continent was not as rich as on Earth. Most people would either rest or cultivate at night. Very few people would go out for entertainment. He didn't stop and continued to rush towards the capital of Western Zhou. Zhao Rong had mentioned that the people of Western Zhou treated the heavens-questioning stone as a sacred object. If there was one, it would be in 2 places. One would be a place like the Holy Temple, and the other would be the Imperial Palace. These 2 places should be in the core prefectural cities. Jiang Xiu didn't take long before he felt something calling him again. It was that feeling again, and this time it was very strong, causing his heart to beat faster. Whoosh! He flew over the sky of Western Zhou. The continent wasn't small, but it wasn't big in the eyes of an enlightened master. With Jiang Xiu's current speed, it wouldn't take him more than a minute to circle the earth. In front of him was a tall mountain. The strong calling came from the direction of the mountain. Is it because of this mountain? Is there a heavens-questioning stone at the foot of the mountain? Jiang Xiu had also thought that the feeling of being summoned came from his bloodline. However, this was Western Zhou, and his bloodline had no direct connection with this place. On the contrary, his natal artifact had a direct connection with this place. Therefore, he guessed that this feeling came from his natal artifact. If the heavens-questioning stone talisman was released and scattered in the mountains, it would take a lot of time to find it. If it was in the past, he would have enough patience. However, he was currently being chased by the Reincarnation Palace. When he approached the mountain, he was stunned. His mind was buzzing and his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. There was a huge statue erected on the mountain. It was a statue of a woman. Whether it was her figure or appearance, it was exactly the same as the statue of the goddess in the ancient desert city on earth. It was Xie Ting. How can this be? Jiang Xiu couldn't imagine it. He thought that when God Buzhou fell, a part of the rubble fell into space and landed in Xie Ting's world after countless years. Then, it had a connection with Earth, which led to what happened later. But now, it seemed that this wasn't the case. If this was the case, the statue of the saintess of the ancient desert city wouldn't appear in Western Zhou on the immortal martial continent. What the hell is going on? Western Zhou and Earth were so far apart, and they were even in completely different planes. How could there be an intersection between the two? It was really incredible. From the fact that Western Zhou had erected the statue of Xie Ting, the saintess, on this mountain, it could be seen that she was also worshipped as a deity, so her status must be respected. He still remembered that the saintess, Xie Ting, was burned at the stake by the Ji clan. At that time, the saintess chose to let the other world descend rather than give up. After that, her shadow condensed in the sky in the form of a cloud and didn't dissipate for a long time, as if she was gazing at the heaven and earth. Jiang Xiu flew towards the statue. When he landed on the ground, he saw how tall the statue was. It was chiseled into the mountain, and beneath her feet was a continuous stretch of palaces and houses. "Why have you come to the sacred mountain so late at night?" An old man was sweeping the fallen leaves on the stairs one by one with a broom. "Can I go in?" Jiang Xiu didn't expect to meet another person, so he asked. "You can go in, but no one arranged it, so you can't worship the deity." Jiang Xiu said, "I'm just passing by, so I'll go in and take a look. Whether or not I worship the deity is secondary." The old man stepped aside and said, "Then go in, but be quiet. The people inside are all asleep, so it's not good to wake them up." From the old man's attitude, it seemed like an ordinary temple, and there was nothing valuable inside. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so open as to let a passerby in. Jiang Xiu walked a few steps, then stopped and looked at the old man who was sweeping the floor. He was a bit puzzled. The old man had some magic power, so logically speaking, he didn't need to use such a clumsy method to sweep the stairs. A gust of wind was all that was needed. Puzzled, he asked, "Old man, why do you have to work so hard to sweep the stairs?" The old man said, "Sweeping the floor is just sweeping. It's not hard at all." Jiang Xiu laughed, but slowly felt that the old man's words were rather zen. However, he didn't talk to him in detail and walked in. The doors were all open, and it was very spacious and very lonely. Along the way, there were pieces of heaven-seeking stone talismans written with strange runes on both sides of the road. They were all imitations and not the real heaven-seeking stone. They were probably left behind by the good men and women who came here to make a wish. After walking around, he still didn't see the main hall. This time, Jiang Xiu was puzzled and had no choice but to turn back. "Old man, where is the main hall?" The old man stopped and said, "There is no main hall. If people want to worship the deity, they will worship the mountain." Oh. Jiang Xiu finally understood why the old man let him in so easily. If you want to worship the deity, go to the mountain and find a stone. Then, go to the heaven-seeking hall and write a few rune scriptures. Then, write the runes that you still remember on the stone and place it somewhere on the mountain to worship it. However, don't put the stone in the middle so that I don't have to move it. Besides, if you move it, it won't work anymore. Jiang Xiu nodded again and asked, "I'm not from here. May I ask where the deity came from?" This was a taboo question. Asking the deity's origin was considered blasphemy. However, the old man didn't seem to mind and said, "Our deity is the descendant of the Buzhou deity. Legend has it that a long time ago, there was a day when the earth was angry. The sky collapsed and the earth cracked. The seawater poured in. Although the Buzhou deity struggled to hold on, he couldn't bear it. In the end, he collapsed due to exhaustion. The entire world was submerged in the vast sea. The tsunamis kept sweeping and almost drowned the entire world. At this time, the people of the world were pleasantly surprised to find that no matter how much the sea water rose, it couldn't drown the deity statue on the mountain. After struggling to no avail, the sea water finally retreated unwillingly. Humans were able to survive. Jiang Xiu's thoughts seemed to have returned to that vast and ancient world. Everything there was barren. Humans were very weak and had to rely on the Protoss for everything. Life was difficult and there was a lack of food. The descendant of the Buzhou deity. The old man said, "Yes, the deity has protected us. It's the same now. No matter how severe the tsunami is, the Buzhou country will never be submerged. This mountain and the deity statue on it will never be submerged. The land back then had already sunk. Only this piece of land still existed in the middle of the sea." Jiang Xiu was very surprised. His description was similar to the people of Earth's understanding of deities. It wasn't a divine elementalist. Jiang Xiu felt that it was a true deity. Other than this, the old man smiled and said, "Young man, don't be so greedy. Good weather is good enough. Don't delude yourself that the deity can give you everything. Jiang Xiu smiled. He didn't need the deity to give him everything because he was a deity. He knew what kind of existence the deity was. It was just that this goddess was a bit strange. Is there a Heaven's Inquisition stone here? The old man pointed to the side and said, These are all here. Jiang Xiu said, I'm talking about the true Heaven's Inquisition stone. The one you worship as a sacred object. The old man shook his head and said, This is our sacred object. Jiang Xiu was helpless. The old man probably didn't know that the Heaven's Inquisition stone was a part of Buzhou's body. Although it wasn't huge, it was still limited. After so many years, there probably wasn't much left. From the old man's words and actions, there might not be a true Heaven's Inquisition stone in the palace. But suddenly, Jiang Xiu's gaze froze. He thought of something and couldn't help but raise his head to look at the goddess statue. The old man said that after Buzhou's deity died, the goddess appeared here. Wasn't that the biggest Heaven's Inquisition stone? Thinking of this, Jiang Xiu's heart skipped a beat. Old man, how do I go up the goddess statue? He could directly fly up, but he didn't want to arouse the old man's curiosity. Then, this staircase will go up. Remember, if you want to worship the deity, you have to first copy the Heaven's Inquisition scripture. Then, find a stone and write down what you remember on it. Then, Jiang Xiu nodded. After listening to the old man, he began to walk up the staircase. His footsteps were very fast. Although the staircase had thousands of steps, it only took him a moment to reach it. In the next moment, he stood in front of the goddess statue. Chapter 573. From the old man's words, Jiang Xiu could deduce that the goddess statue was a Heaven's Inquisition stone. However, when he got closer, he discovered a problem. There was no Heaven's Inquisition talisman on the statue. The Heaven's Inquisition stone was made up of two parts. One was naturally the Heaven's Inquisition stone formed from the body of the god of Buzhou. The other was the divine imprint. The Heaven's Inquisition talisman was the same as the divine imprint on Jiang Xiu's body. Both were indispensable. Talismans were mostly exposed on the surface of the skin. However, the goddess statue in front of him was wearing clothes. If they were real clothes, Jiang Xiu would really tear them off to see if there were any divine imprints on the skin. However, the goddess statue was a stone statue. How could a stone statue tear off clothes? Wasn't that just a fool's dream? But then again, if it weren't for the talisman on the goddess statue, which was a real Heaven's Inquisition stone, it would have been snatched away long ago. Jiang Xiu raised his head and looked at the somewhat familiar face of the goddess statue. Her beautiful eyes were full of hope, and she was very quick-witted. It was as if she was looking at Jiang Xiu, and there was even a moving smile on her lips. Xie Ting, I didn't expect that we would meet here. Jiang Xiu recalled Xie Ting's words and actions in the past. In the past, Jiang Xiu really didn't pay much attention to this little girl. It wasn't until the changes in the water of the ancient desert city that Jiang Xiu started to pay attention to her. However, he didn't take it to heart. Jiang Xiu was too arrogant. He thought that even if Xie Ting came from another world, it couldn't be of a higher level than the immortal martial continent. However, he didn't expect that Xie Ting was actually a descendant of the god of Buzhou. How did she come into contact with Earth? How many years had she experienced in the process? It was hard to imagine. Now, I can be considered to be in trouble. If your spirit is in heaven, please bless me. Jiang Xiu had helped her several times. Now that Jiang Xiu was being hunted by the Reincarnation Palace, he needed the Heaven's Inquiry Stone Talisman to increase his strength. However, he didn't know if Xie Ting was truly dead. Jiang Xiu stared straight at the statue's face, feeling amused in his heart. This is a desperate case of seeking help from a statue. Instead of waiting for the help of a descendant of God Buzhou, whose life or death is unknown, it's more likely for me to chisel a stone and write the heavenly question talisman on it. Just as he was about to leave, Jiang Xiu's gaze fell on the goddess statue's open palm. Whoosh! Zhang Xiu turned into a beam of light and soared into the sky, flying over 1,000 meters. He felt as if he could pluck the moon with his hand and land on the palm of the goddess statue. Her palm was extremely large, and it was more than enough to build a palace in her palm. There was a rock in the palm that stood out, as if it didn't fit in with the rest of the palm. It was even larger than the 6 rocks on Earth put together. Zhang Xiu walked over to take a look. He couldn't help but feel disappointed. There was no talisman on it. He really hoped that there was a fish that slipped through the net. Logically speaking, since he was summoned here, he should have left the Heaven's Inquiry Stone here. Only then would he be able to summon it. Otherwise, could it be that Xie Ting was still alive? He reached out and gave it a push. The dust on the stone scattered all over the ground, and a faint halo shone through. Although it was very dim, it was real. Zhang Xiu was delighted. However, ordinary stones wouldn't glow. He immediately waved his sleeve and a strong wind swept out. Under the strong wind, the dust on the stone was blown away bit by bit, revealing its true appearance. One rune after another appeared on the surface of the stone. The Longevity Stone. Zhang Xiu was overjoyed. He couldn't help but recall that after Xie Ting's death, other than her face and head, there was also a hand above the sea of clouds. Was it hinting to him that there was a Longevity Stone in the hand of the goddess? There really is one. Moreover, this stone was much larger than the one Zhang Xiu had absorbed before. It was several times larger than a basketball. Ordinary people couldn't even move it. There were talismans written all over it. Zhang Xiu couldn't understand them. Perhaps he should learn the Heaven's Inquiry Talisman. However, Zhang Xiu didn't have the time for that. He needed to absorb and refine this Longevity Stone talisman as soon as possible. The Heaven's Inquiry Stone was formed from the body of God Buzhou. It contained a certain kind of law between heaven and earth. The Longevity Stone that Zhang Xiu had refined contained the law of the world. Although it wasn't integrated and wasn't complete, it was still very powerful. This Longevity Stone was much larger than the previous one, and it was hidden so well by the goddess. There might be a complete law inside. He immediately sat down cross-legged and began to refine and absorb it. Halfway up the mountain, the old man was still sweeping the stairs. It was as if he would feel happy every time he finished sweeping a step. He was meticulous, sweeping down step by step. However, when a gust of wind blew, the leaves on the tree would fall down. Even so, he still meticulously swept the ground without any complaints. Zhang Xiu was surrounded by clouds in the goddess' palm. It was as if the moon was on his shoulder. The surface of the Longevity Stone on his body began to turn into light spots. They floated up like sand, but they didn't disperse. Yes, it's the wind. Among the 6 gods of the great god sealing technique, there was wind. Otherwise, Zhang Xiu would be really depressed. This time, he began to absorb without hesitation. A strong light flashed on his forehead, and a flying knife slowly flew out of his forehead along with the light, and flashed out again. Zhang Xiu couldn't absorb it directly. He could only refine it with his natal divine tool. There were also many heavenly wind laws. Speed, slowness, strength, quantity. There were various uses of the laws. Wind was formless and had thousands of changes. It had endless wonderful uses. There were as many as 11 types. Not only did he have to comprehend all of them, he also had to fuse them. The complete heavenly wind laws. It was just as Zhang Xiu had expected. It was such a big piece, and it was hidden so well. As expected, it was complete. After comprehending the complete heavenly wind laws, Zhang Xiu's cultivation level should have more than enough to reach the peak stage of upper heavenly deity. His original heavenly fire laws were already close to perfection. With the addition of the heavenly wind laws, Zhang Xiu would be able to break through to great heavenly deity. The only regret was that breaking through to great heavenly deity wasn't just about reaching perfection in one's laws. He also had to break through the limits of his divine body. The flying knife was absorbing the sand of light emitted by the heavenly question stone at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was constantly growing stronger. Moreover, various small hurricanes could be faintly seen in the sand of light. It was this that formed various wonderful uses of the laws of wind. It was very dazzling. The old man who was sweeping the floor raised his head to take a look. However, he didn't take it seriously. Time passed little by little. The full moon in the sky had already disappeared without a trace. The world was pitch black. It was the darkest moment before dawn. It was also the coldest time of the world. The cold air in the mountains surged. Zhang Xiu's clothes fluttered incessantly in the wind. However, the radiance of the flying knife in front of his forehead was becoming more and more dazzling. Why does it seem like there are stars flashing over there? The old man raised his head again. Suddenly, the radiance there dimmed. However, immediately after, there was a boom. A fierce beam of light soared into the sky, reaching the 9 heavens. All the dark clouds were blown away by the powerful beam of light. Ah, what is this? The old man was extremely shocked. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiu had already stood up. His long hair was fluttering like flames, and his clothes were fluttering in the wind. A fierce wind was wreaking havoc around his body. The thin membrane in his body was immediately blown away. The factors of his bloodline were once again refined. With a loud boom, some kind of invisible membrane in his body was once again blown away. Boom, boom, boom. The bloody light that exploded from his entire body was incomparably dazzling. Even the rocks under his feet were separated by extremely fine traces of light. Almost at the same time, a rising sun rose into the sky from the horizon. In an instant, the world was suffused with the color of a fish belly, and the sky became bright all of a sudden. Perfection of the laws of heavenly wind. Whoosh! The flying knife in front of his forehead entered his body. Then, his entire body exploded with a loud boom, turning into balls of whirlwinds that wreaked havoc in this part of the world. Whoosh! Suddenly, a sea curtain that was several hundred meters high was raised above the surface of the sea. Peak of the upper heavenly god stage. Zhang Xiu could feel that his cultivation level had reached the peak of the heavenly god stage. If he continued to advance, he would become a great heavenly god. After obtaining the perfection of the laws of heavenly wind, he already possessed the conditions to break through to the great heavenly god stage. Now, he only lacked an opportunity. However, it was already too late. The sky was already bright, and the assassins of the reincarnation palace were about to arrive. Chapter 574. The sun rose from the horizon, and the sunlight dispelled the darkness. Zhang Xiu turned into a fierce gust of wind and flew across the sky. He was blown into the Tianwen Palace, where the Tianwen Talisman was. After absorbing 2 large pieces of Tianwen Talisman, Zhang Xiu felt that the Tianwen Talisman was very mysterious. It was a divine pattern that appeared on Buzhou deity and contained endless mysteries of heaven and earth. He felt that he had to memorize it and study the difference between it and the immortal talisman. Perhaps he would have a chance to translate the immortal talisman into divine talisman. If he could do that, he would be able to show off his Chenqing school's immortal martial arts. As long as his realm returned, so would his strength. No, he might even be stronger. The long table was full of books, all about the Tianwen talisman. Perhaps there were too many pilgrims and one book was not enough, so many books were prepared. Zhang Xiu flipped through it carefully. After absorbing 2 large pieces of the Heaven's Inquisition Talisman Stone, he had some understanding of the Heaven's Inquisition Talisman Amulet. However, this was equivalent to knowing a few men in a Chinese dictionary. He was still far from truly understanding it. However, this did not stop Zhang Xiu from memorizing the entire Heaven's Inquisition Talisman Amulet. He quickly flipped through the pages without stopping. In less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn, he had finished reading the entire Heaven's Inquisition Talisman. Then he closed the book and quickly went through it in his mind. Then he put the book down. Then he turned and left. The city of Western Zhou at the foot of the mountain was already bustling. The streets were full of people, and the sound of hawking rose and fell. Judging from the situation, the population was not small, but most of them were ordinary people. It was very similar to Qingzhou and Lingzhou. Jiang Xiu had been hunted for so long that he hadn't eaten anything. He walked in when he saw a tea house that served breakfast. There were many people eating breakfast in the tea house. There were all kinds of people, and they were chatting about something. Jiang Xiu found a seat and sat down. However, the content of the conversation surprised Jiang Xiu. "The Samsara Palace has fallen. I heard about it too." The 3 words, Samsara Palace, were enough to arouse Jiang Xiu's interest. That person is Jiang Xiu. It is said that he is a student of Qianqing School. Although there was no internet in the immortal martial continent, the speed at which news spread was even more astonishing. There were plenty of people who wanted to humiliate the Reincarnation Hall. As long as the Reincarnation Hall suffered a setback, the news would spread like wildfire. That's right. His name is Jiang Xiu. He's just a high heavenly deity. We tried to hunt him down, but all of them failed. One of them died, one was injured. There was also a great heavenly immortal and an immortal king. Jiang Xiu listened with interest. In the past, he would often hear similar discussions. At that time, Zhang Luoxia was constantly rushing upwards, surpassing the peak experts of the immortal martial continent one after another. From the Qianqing School, to the Qing Prefecture, to the entire immortal martial continent, he left behind an opportunity that shocked the world. The Samsara Palace has released the assassin ranking. Jiang Xiu was stunned when he heard this. The Samsara Palace's assassin ranking was a public pursuit. Every assassin they sent out would be announced to the world, from the lowest to the highest. This was also the Samsara Palace's way of ranking their assassins. It seemed that Jiang Xiu had really angered the Samsara Palace. Number 101 of the Samsara Palace, Great Heavenly Immortal Hei Chong Mu. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Number 100 is a great heavenly immortal. Number 101 is the strongest person under the great heavenly immortal realm. How many people can Jiang Xiu escape from? The people present made their predictions one after another. Some said there would be 2, some said there would be 3, but more people thought there would only be 1. The Samsara Palace was furious. They had sent this person to take down Jiang Xiu. Jiang Xiu stuffed a piece of meat into his mouth and smiled coldly. What was the fastest way to become famous? According to the usual rules, it was to fight with all kinds of geniuses and compete for the ranking of geniuses on various ranking lists, such as the Hidden Dragon ranking, the Clear Spirit ranking, and even the Sword ranking for high-level swordsmen. Above that was the Immortal Martial ranking. However, in the Immortal Martial ranking, where geniuses were as common as dogs, it was extremely difficult to make a name for oneself. There was another way to go about it. Of course, it was to be hunted down by someone, and everyone knew about it. However, the result was no exception. One would be stained with blood, and one's life would fade away. No matter how talented one was, one would be like a shooting star gliding across the sky. And now, Jiang Xiu seemed to have embarked on a completely different path from the previous one. This Jiang Xiu is incredible. His talent is so heaven-defying that he is even more monstrous than the former master of the Qianqing School, Zhang Luoxia. It is said that he rushed from the lower heavenly immortal realm to the upper heavenly immortal realm in just 4 months. Wow! The tea house was in an uproar. From the lower heavenly immortal realm to the upper heavenly immortal realm, this is impossible. It's absolutely true. It has already been recorded by the Consonance Pavilion. It was said that the Consonance Pavilion knew everything in the world and had never made a mistake. If that's the case, why didn't the Qianqing School save this disciple? Sigh. The person who knew the inside story sighed deeply and said, "It is said that this disciple offended the Tai Hua sect." Everyone knows that the Tai Hua sect and the Qianqing School have that kind of relationship. Jiang Xiu killed 4 disciples of the Tai Hua sect. Not only will the Tai Hua sect not let him go, but even the Chenqing school will not tolerate him. The Reincarnation Palace was able to take this job because of the Tai Hua sect. That's really a pity. There were many geniuses in the Immortal Martial Arts Academy. There were also many who were more dazzling than Zhang Luoxia in the early stages. Some of them did not have enough stamina and gradually became mediocre, while others were killed in the middle. It was actually more difficult for geniuses to stand out than for ordinary disciples. Geniuses were arrogant because of their talent and would even be envied by others. In the immortal martial arts world, where one had to step on the corpses of others to advance, without anyone's protection, most people would be killed in the cradle. For example, Zhang Luoxia had bravely advanced all the way and had the protection of his master to become an immortal king. He was the only one in the past 3,000 years. If he had been obedient and cultivated, he might have become an immortal king in the future. But geniuses are not willing to be mediocre. Zhang Xiu was extremely grateful to his master and his fellow disciples. Without their protection, even if he was a genius, he would never have been able to become the headmaster of Chenqing School. On the surface of the sea, a man in a black robe spun on the spot. His figure was blurred by a gray cloud of black gas. When the black gas suddenly entered his body, he disappeared on the spot. The next moment, he appeared at the entrance of the tea house. This is the Samsara Hall's business. If you don't want to die, get out. The voice came from outside the tea house. They were just discussing the Samsara Hall when the person in question arrived. After being stunned for a second, everyone put down their chopsticks and rushed out of the tea house. Someone stole a glance as they ran out and exclaimed, "It's Black Ash Wood." His whole body was shrouded in a black robe, but the pattern on the back of his robe was unique to him. Anyone who knew him would be able to recognize him at a glance. Black Ash Wood. The person he wants to kill is in the hall? Zhang Xiu. Only then did everyone realize that the rising genius they had been talking about for a long time was eating breakfast in the same tea house as them. Umph. Black Ash Wood snorted coldly and waved his sleeve. With a boom, the seemingly sturdy heavy wood pavilion exploded instantly under his attack. In the whistling wind, wood chips flew everywhere. Only a table was left unscathed. A layer of wind swept around it, protecting it in the middle. Zhang Xiu was sitting behind the table, eating breakfast leisurely. After the whistling wind stopped, the onlookers began to whisper to each other. "He's Zhang Xiu." Black Ash Wood looked at Zhang Xiu with a gloomy gaze, but he still laughed. "What, not running this time?" Before this, Zhang Xiu had been running for his life, looking very miserable. Zhang Xiu put a piece of meat in his mouth and glanced over. He coldly and confidently said, "You don't need to run at all." Impudent. He made a hand seal, and his black robe fluttered. The black light on his body expanded, and a faint dark green scale armor appeared on the surface of his body. Then, there was a rumbling sound, and a sky full of seawater appeared out of nowhere, drowning Zhang Xiu. "If you don't want to run, then die here." As soon as he finished speaking, he pointed his finger again. Suddenly, dots of black light pierced through the deep blue water and disappeared without a trace. Then, the waves began to buzz. 4 elements heavy water? Someone exclaimed in shock. The momentum of the water suddenly changed as if it was carrying an endless weight. Chapter 575. The 4 elements of heavy water was a unique water of heaven and earth. It was mainly because of the word, heavy. It was definitely heavy. A drop of 4 elements of heavy water from the sky was enough to destroy an entire mountain. Even a great celestial immortal Taoist body would find it difficult to withstand. Almost at the same time, a blue light spot appeared in the void. It once again turned into a huge wave that rushed towards Zhang Xiu. The waves continued to rise and let out a loud buzzing sound as if they were going to destroy everything. This water was no longer ordinary water. When it pressed down, its power could definitely crush everything into powder. Seeing this, Zhang Xiu's face darkened. A trace of ferocity appeared on his cold face. His forehead flashed with a strong light. Then let's see if his newly evolved natal weapon or his opponent's 4 elements of heavy water was stronger. With a whoosh, his natal weapon rushed out from his divine essence. Then, a series of runes floated out and slowly condensed into a long saber in Jiang Xiu's hand. The light blue seawater in front of him swept up to a height of 1,000 meters. It was as if the sky was collapsing. In the sky that was pressing down, a huge water ball spun out. The outside of the water ball looked blue and calm, but the seawater inside was surging wildly. In an instant, it formed a huge whirlpool. An astonishing force swept out from it. At the same time, a blue light screen flashed continuously. Ha! Jiang Xiu didn't even stand up. The long saber in his hand slashed out. The long saber grew with the wind. In an instant, it was about 1,000 feet long. It slashed down from the sky. At this moment, the saber radiance was tens of thousands of feet long. The whole world seemed to be cut by this silver saber radiance. There was a spatial dislocation. Chi! The saber radiance directly slashed on the water ball. It seemed to be formed by water, but its power was so great that even the air was distorted. When the saber radiance slashed on the water ball, it burst into dazzling sparks and made an ear-piercing sound. The moment when the two powerful forces collided, it seemed calm, but in fact, there was an inestimable power fighting crazily inside. After a delay of a full second, there was a terrifying loud noise. Just the sound waves alone were enough to make all the eaves in the surroundings feel as if they had been hit by a level 20 tsunami. Not only were the eaves sent flying, but they were also crushed into sawdust in the air. It stretched out for hundreds of thousands of meters, and the surrounding area collapsed with a loud rumble. As for the huge whirlpool inside the water ball, blue water arcs appeared out of thin air. At the same time, the whirlpool spun faster and faster, and the distance between the people became even more astonishing. As a result, the power that had been suppressed by the saber became even more violent. Instead, the saber showed signs of being pushed back. Jiang Xiu's defeat was evident. On the surface, the 4 elements heavy water should be weaker than Jiang Xiu's natal artifact. This was enough to shock everyone. No one's natal artifact could reach this level. However, the Black Azure would have already completely integrated the 4 elements heavy water into his spells. On the other hand, Jiang Xiu's saber Dao was very shallow. The so-called 7 records saber technique was transformed from the 7 records sword technique. It was completely unable to keep up with Jiang Xiu's current realm, and could not maximize the power of his natal artifact. With a puff, a water arc spun out from the water ball. It looked inconspicuous, but the force behind the spinning water ball was added to it. The terrifying power of the water was that one wave after another could not be broken. As such, the water arc suddenly lit up with blue light and directly hit the long saber. With a whoosh, it hit the saber and burst into flames, instantly covering the saber. Jiang Xiu felt the burning pain and snorted coldly. He pulled back his right hand and at the same time, stretched out his left hand. Both hands continuously formed mysterious runes. These runes seemed to have a life of their own. They were more like small hurricanes, blowing over with a whoosh. The heavenly wind law had reached perfection. The gale swept directly towards the saber, extinguishing the flames in an instant. Jiang Xiu, don't struggle. Give me your life. As soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Xiu had already stood up. At the same time, he took a step forward and disappeared into the void in front of him. The next moment, when Jiang Xiu reappeared, he was swift and fierce. He held the saber in his hand and slashed down again. If the first slash did not succeed, he would use the second slash. What shocked Jiang Xiu was that when the saber slashed down, there was no dazzling light. However, the sky was filled with the howling of the wind. The saber was so fast that its shadow could not be seen. It disappeared in a blur. Although the saber was untraceable, the ultimate target of the saber was predictable. No one could imagine the sharpness of the saber, and no one could imagine the speed of the saber. However, when they saw the saber again, the saber had already slashed the ground. After a while, there was a flash of light, allowing people to see that the saber had slashed down from the water ball. It had slashed down from the spinning water ball. The water ball had been slashed through. The 4 elements heavy water had been slashed through. Whoosh! The onlookers who had fled far away did not leave. They were not willing to miss such a great battle. They were all stunned. They had never heard that a strange water like the 4 elements heavy water could be slashed through. Heavy water was extremely soft. What was that just now? It's the wind blade on the saber. It's not metal, it's not the blade. Yes, it's a wind blade. Many of the people present were all experts with amazing eyesight. They could see that Jiang Xiu's saber had been augmented with the profound meaning of wind sharpness. To be able to slash through the 4 elements heavy water, one had to be at the perfected golden core great Tao. The spinning water ball stopped. After losing its power, it collapsed with a crash, and half of the seawater fell to the ground. No, impossible. The Black Azure Wood's incredulous cry came from behind the water curtain. The 4 elements heavy water was a Dharma treasure that was extremely soft. How could it be slashed through by a saber? Wake up! This life-divine artifact was Bu Zhou-shun's body. It was augmented with the perfected heavenly wind laws. Whoosh! Jiang Xiu waved his hand and a flash of light shot out. It was a flying saber that shot towards the waves that were pressing down on the water curtain. In a flash, it disappeared into the water curtain, leaving a trail of light in the sky. The flash of light brought with it a smear of bright red blood. Kiki! The Black Azure Wood could only make such strange sounds. His throat had been cut and he could no longer speak. After the flash of light, his pupils contracted and his body fell forward. The water curtain that had lost the support of Dharma power also fell from the sky. When the water curtain thousands of meters high came crashing down, it was also a disaster for the streets of Western Zhou. A ton of water falling from the sky was already very terrifying. When the water curtain thousands of meters high came crashing down, its power could be imagined. The surrounding buildings that had already been destroyed were also destroyed. The water curtain fell directly on the Black Azure Wood's body. However, his head was cut open by the flying saber and his body was crushed into mud by the water pressure. After the water flowed away, the head fell down and was nailed to the wall at the far end by a chopstick. Dead, dead. Black Azure Wood of the 101 Samsara Palace was killed. The spectators were all shocked. Even so, the Samsara Palace had already failed 5 times. Moreover, the opponent was a mere divine realm expert. However, at this moment, the way the crowd looked at Jiang Xiu had changed. It was completely different from before. They now knew Jiang Xiu to be powerful. The power of the saber slashing the 4 elements of heavy water was probably enough to threaten a great divine immortal. Since the 4 elements of heavy water could threaten a great divine immortal, then Jiang Xiu's saber technique could also threaten a great divine immortal. Samsara Palace, if 1 comes, I'll kill 1. If 2 come, I'll kill 2. I'll hang their heads in the cities of Western Zhou. Jiang Xiu's words caused an uproar. My God, is he declaring war on the Samsara Palace, which is feared by everyone? This had never happened before. Even the major sects of the immortal martial continent were extremely afraid of the Samsara Palace. Tianqing School is really full of monsters. First, there was Zhang Luoxia, and now there's Jiang Xiu. He's such a freak. Everyone present thought that the Samsara Palace's assassin list would definitely be 100 Faces. That would be a great divine immortal. As a divine realm expert, Jiang Xiu had no chance of winning against a great divine immortal. How could he challenge the Samsara Palace? Moreover, he had declared that he would hang the heads of the pursuers high in the cities of Western Zhou. Everyone thought that they should escape at this time. Perhaps they would have a chance to live. However, they didn't expect Jiang Xiu to sit down and wait for the people of the Samsara Palace. Chapter 576. The news that Jiang Xiu had killed He Chongmu, who ranked 101st on the Samsara Palace's assassin list, spread like wildfire. Everyone who heard the news was shocked. Zhang Xiu's name was about to spread. Those in Western Zhou were waiting to see how long Zhang Xiu could live. They were more than happy to see the awe-inspiring Samsara Palace lose face. In the Samsara Palace, when a middle-aged man in white received the news, his face darkened. He had been killed again. 2 people had been killed consecutively. What a disgrace! If they sent more people, they would be great celestial immortals. Publicly sending a great celestial immortal to kill a divine realm expert was equivalent to admitting that the Samsara Palace had no one left. With a bang, he smashed the teacup in anger. The disciples and subordinates beside him were so frightened that they all knelt down and lowered their heads, not daring to make a sound. Do you want the world to see the Samsara Palace as a joke? Over the years, the Samsara Palace's prestige had been rising rapidly. But today's news was undoubtedly a great blow to the Samsara Palace. This made the world look down on the Samsara Palace. The so-called king of assassins, the so-called Samsara Palace, could not even deal with a divine realm expert. This person must not live past today. Yes. The people below roared in agreement. For them, this was a great humiliation. The Samsara Palace, as big as they were, could not deal with a small divine realm expert? It was really a disgrace to their prestige. Over the years, the Samsara Palace had killed many people, and the longest they had survived was not more than 13 days. Everyone was scared to death when they heard the name of the Samsara Palace. However, it was not easy to intimidate them. They knew that it was difficult to establish authority, but it was easy to destroy it. If they did not handle the matter of Zhang Xiu well, everyone would dare to go against the Samsara Palace. At that time, the Samsara Palace would be attacked by everyone. The Samsara Palace had indeed killed many people. Although they were only tools to kill people and were not the real masterminds behind the scenes, they had still incurred the hatred of many people. As the saying goes, 1 punch defeats 10,000 punches. Who will go? Someone stepped forward. This person was very tall. If Zhang Xiu saw him, he would definitely have an impression of him. He was the great heavenly immortal who could condense wings of light on his back and wanted to take Zhang Xiu's life with a single palm strike. He escaped from me. Let me end him. Go. After getting the approval, he turned around and was about to leave. He could condense light wings on his back and was extremely fast. Now he heard that Zhang Xiu was sitting in the Western Zhou waiting for them. This kind of naked provocation, if they didn't kill him before today, the Samsara Palace would really lose face. If he escapes, you can commit suicide on the spot. He crossed his arms and bowed deeply to the person above him. Yes. The Assassin's organization had always been indifferent to life. The Samsara Palace, on the other hand, had always let the living enter and the dead leave. This was the family rule. Wait. At this moment, another white-robed middle-aged man walked in from outside the hall. It was the immortal king sitting on the peak. Since he can escape from under your nose once, it's possible that he can escape from under your hands a second time. Lord Fon Tian. Seeing the person who came, everyone bowed. The great celestial immortal fell silent when he heard this. This person was called Wan Yunfei and was ranked 75th on the assassin's ranking. He wasn't bad in the Samsara Palace, but he didn't dare to refute Fon Tian's words. Lord, please give me another chance. Fon Tian shook his head and said, Not to mention you, even I suffered a loss from him. To let him escape from under my nose, this child is indeed a little strange. Hearing this, everyone present was extremely shocked. They stared at the immortal king with wide eyes. They couldn't believe it. There were rumors outside that the Samsara Palace's immortal king couldn't stop Zhang Xiu. However, they all thought that someone was maliciously slandering him. They never thought that it was actually true. Moreover, the one who made the move was Fon Tian, the top expert ranked 3rd on the assassin's ranking. The person in front of them had escaped from the infernal realm prison. Before this, he had been imprisoned there for thousands of years and was known as the North King of Hell. Fon Tian of the North had crawled out from a mountain of corpses and a sea of bones in the land of slaughter. How could he let a mere heavenly god escape? Lord, do you mean that you want the immortal king to deal with him? The person at the top said. Fon Tian said, reporting to the palace master, I will go with Wan Yunfei. Hua, the crowd once again went into an uproar. How could this be? Lord Fun Tian, are you joking? You want to go with Wan Yunfei? One of you, an immortal king, one of you, a great celestial immortal, are going to chase after a mere heavenly god, a disciple of the Tianqing school? The people below were in an uproar. Lord Fun Tian, aren't you overestimating him too much? Is he worthy? Fon Tian's face revealed a serious expression. Whether he is worthy or not, I don't know. But I really want to know how he escaped from my outer six directions secret technique. I want to see his methods on the spot. Hearing this, everyone present fell silent. Although everyone felt that this was killing a chicken with a butcher's knife, since Lord Fun Tian had already decided, unless the palace master gave the order, no one could refuse. Then, all right. The news spread out from the Reincarnation Palace. The second batch of 2 people on the assassin ranking, Wan Yunfei, ranked 75th on the assassin ranking, and Fon Tian, ranked 3rd on the assassin ranking. Once the news spread, it really exploded. Those who heard the news almost jumped up. A great celestial immortal and an immortal king chasing after a heavenly god? It was simply exploding. Zhang Xiu's name immediately spread to the ears of countless people. This was definitely a name worth remembering, and would be praised by countless immortal martial poets. And many people began to investigate Zhang Xiu. Just how capable was this person? At the same time, the news spread to the Tianqing school. The elders of the Tianqing school all went out to investigate the dragon veins and decided to move the disciples, but the disciples were still in the sect. Especially the chief disciple, Shan Kuan, when he heard the news, he was stunned for a long time. The other disciples in the sect were simply in an uproar. If a disciple was being hunted down, according to the tradition of the Tianqing school, it must be taken in. Moreover, Zhang Xiu had always been regarded as Zhang Luoxiar in the sect, and the other party's assassins were a great celestial immortal and an immortal king. They were simply shameless. Many true disciples in the sect rushed to the main peak, asking the sect to help. Eldest senior brother, please give the order to allow us to rush to the western Zhou nation. Yes, we must not watch sect master Zhang be killed by the people of the Reincarnation Palace. This will make our Tianqing school lose face. Of course, Shen Kuan knew in his heart that Zhang Xiu was not Zhang Luoxia, and he also knew who ordered the Reincarnation Palace to kill Zhang Xiu. This was something tacitly approved by the sect master. It was to kill Zhang Xiu. Everyone, senior brothers and junior sisters. The hall was in a mess. Many disciples couldn't wait to set off immediately. Otherwise, they would be too late. Quiet, quiet. Normally, the Reincarnation Palace would not kill the disciples of the big sects, because the big sects were really not to be trifled with. However, Zhang Xiu's order was tacitly approved by the Tianqing schoolmaster, so they thought that they could accept it. Killing a disciple of the Tianqing school could greatly strengthen the reputation of the Reincarnation Palace, and there would be no trouble. Why not? Shen Kuan had a headache. The sect master and the elders are not here. As the chief disciple, I dare not make the decision. Eldest senior brother, are we just going to watch sect master Zhang be killed? Then what will happen to the Tianqing school's face? Yes, even if we have to risk our lives, we must not let the Reincarnation Palace do whatever they want to do to the Tianqing school. Shan Kuan said, everyone, listen to me. The sect master and the elders are not here, and we have to face a celestial king. Other than losing our lives for nothing, what else can we do? Do you want to cause the Tianqing school to go to war with the Reincarnation Palace? A senior brother said, let's go to war. Do you think our Tianqing school is afraid of the Reincarnation Palace? How dare you? Shan Kuan roared sternly, pay attention to your status. Is this something a disciple like you can say? If we really start a war between the sects, you know how many people and blood will be lost. If we fight with the Reincarnation Palace, even if we win, we will have to pay an incomparably painful price. Since the masters are not here, the most important thing we should do is to protect the sect. As for the life and death of an individual, how can it be compared to the safety of the entire sect? The disciples below looked at the chief disciple with resentment. They were unconvinced, but they couldn't say anything. They didn't have the right. Are we just going to let the reincarnation palace kill the people of our Tianqing school? Shan Kuan said, "We'll wait for the masters to come back and make a decision. As for sect master Jiang, let's leave it to fate." However, he was laughing in his heart. It would be a miracle if he didn't die now. Chapter 577. This news was too shocking. The news that a celestial king and a great celestial king had joined forces to kill an unknown kid quickly spread. The 13 celestial kings of Tianqing school who were outside of Qingzhou also heard the news. Among the 13 celestial kings, except for the sect leader, Ji Daozong, everyone thought that Zhang Xiu was Zhang Luoxia. Moreover, the Samsara Palace had sent people who were at the same level as Zhang Xiu to hunt him down. This caused an uproar on the spot. If the former sect leader of Tianqing school was killed by the Samsara Palace, where would the Tianqing school's face go? What did you say? The law-enforcing elder, Xia Shun, still couldn't believe it. It's true. The news has already spread. I also heard that the Taihua sect issued the kill order. When the disciple said this, he carefully looked at the Ji Daozong. The Ji Daozong's face immediately turned cold. The disciple didn't know whether the Ji Daozong's face turned cold because of the Taihua sect's kill order or because he said it out loud. Taihua sect? All the elders present looked at the sect leader who was sitting on the throne. Everyone's eyes were filled with dissatisfaction. Everyone knew what the Samsara Palace was like. No matter how fierce the Samsara Palace was, they didn't dare to openly provoke a big sect like Tianqing school. When they received orders from disciples of big sects, they would assassinate them and would never expose themselves. If they made the killer list public, it was tantamount to challenging the Tianqing school. The Samsara Palace wasn't that stupid, unless they had some kind of tacit agreement. Moreover, the sect leader who issued the killing order was Taihua sect, so it wasn't difficult to think of Ji Daozong. After all, he couldn't tolerate the former sect leader. Sect leader Ji, what's going on? Ji Daozong was also very depressed. Originally, he thought that killing a small divine god would be a piece of cake for the Samsara Palace, making him disappear without a trace. However, he didn't expect that the matter would become so big. The Samsara Palace didn't live up to its reputation. Moreover, the matter of moving the sect had already caused all the elders present to be very dissatisfied with him. Now, this matter popped up again. It was fine if it was just an ordinary disciple, but Zhang Xiu was using the identity of Zhang Luoxia. Ji Daozong really felt that he had lifted a rock and smashed it on his own foot. I'm not sure either. Although the Taihua sect is related to our sect by marriage, it's still a big sect. Moreover, Lord Jiang once went to the Taihua sect and owed them a debt of blood. It's natural for them to want revenge. The elders present were all furious. Sect leader Jiang went to Taihua sect for the sake of the sect. If he wanted to calculate, then he would count the entire Tianqing school. No one could escape. The law-enforcing elder Xia Shun's face was livid. Sect Master, you're the son-in-law of the Taihua sect. Why didn't the Taihua sect tell you that they wanted to kill our disciples in public? This, Ji Daozong's expression changed. Is he right or not? Elder Q Sword on the side also questioned. As the sect master, Ji Daozong was embarrassed to be questioned like this. His face was as dark as water, but it was not easy to answer. However, human instinct was to shift the blame. The Taihua sect didn't only attack us. Elder Q Sword snorted coldly. Does the Taihua sect really think that our Tianqing school is weak and easy to bully? Tianqing school had always been very strong. It had the valiance of a big sect in its bones. Unfortunately, it had been suppressed by Ji Daozong these years and was very depressed. Let's go. Let's go and meet the terrifying Tianqing school. The Samsara Palace openly wanted to kill the former sect master of Chenqing school. If the Chenqing school did nothing, then where would the dignity of the sect be? Where would the pride and glory of the sect's disciples be? The Chenqing school would lose its soul. Ji Daozong's deep and terrifying voice sounded. Elder Q Sword, are you leaving? Elder Q Sword said, yes. Ji Daozong snorted coldly. Did I say you could leave? We're here to explore the new site of Chenqing school. It's related to the foundation of Chenqing school for tens of thousands of years. Is it not as important as an ordinary disciple? Yes, Jiang Luoxia was just an ordinary disciple now, and Ji Daozong was the sect master. However, Elder Q Sword did not give in. Moving the sect is important, but the Samsara Palace openly hunted our disciples. If we don't do anything, the Chenqing school will be disappointed, and they will be alienated from the Chenqing school. Isn't this loss more important than moving the sect, which can't be done in a short time? Everyone, who else will go with us? Law enforcing Elder Xia Shun said, I'll go with you. The other elders saw that the two most important elders of the two sects were going. If they did not express their opinions, it would seem unreasonable. After all, that was the former sect master. I'll go with you, Xiaoya said. Then I'll go and take a look, Lu Chongkong agreed. Well, now there were 4 immortal kings. They felt that this was a bit too extravagant. Ji Daozong's face was very ugly. Are you openly going against the sect's decision? Whether it was in Chenqing school or other sects, the sect master's order was supreme. He could control life and death. If an elder disobeyed the sect master, he could order them to be executed. Although Ji Daozong had this power, could he really kill an elder? However, the sect leader's power was also very strong. His cold words caused the elders present to feel a chill in their hearts. However, Elder Q Sword had already made up his mind. Even if the sect leader blames me this time, this elder must go. Chenqing school's dignity cannot be lost. Law enforcing elder said, very good. Ji Daozong sneered and said, this is public. Are you really going against the sect's order? Elder Q Sword said, please forgive us, sect master. Seeing that Elder Q Sword was so resolute, Ji Daozong knew that he might not be able to stop today's matter. He laughed and said, do you think I'm an unreasonable person who can't distinguish right from wrong? If you want to go, then go. Come back quickly. The expressions on the elders' faces relaxed. Thank you, sect master. After the 4 people left, Ji Daozong had a cold smile on his face. He got off the flying boat and took the lead to fly through the mountain range to meet up with Ling Su, who was checking the terrain of the mountain range. If there were no accidents, they would choose this place. The main reason was that Madame also liked this place and was chatting with Ling Su. Ha, ha, ha. Ji Daozong let out a strange laugh. He didn't really disagree just now, he was just stalling for time. The distance from where they were to the western Zhou country was more than a few million miles. By the time the elders arrived, they would already be dead. They could only put on a futile show for the disciples of Chenqing school. The 4 elders were all famous figures in Chenqing school and even in the continent. When the 4 immortal kings attacked together, the momentum was really extraordinary. When they used the escape light, it was really fast as if there was no trace. Everyone's body was shrouded in a light shield. At high speed, the surrounding scenery became very blurry. Everyone, let's do our best. Yes. Yes. Boom, boom. The whole world shook non-stop. After the people below saw the sky distort, the white clouds surged endlessly, forming a strange surging scene. Then, a cloud flower exploded with a loud bang. Only an immortal king realm expert would have such power just by flying over. It's immortal kings! Someone exclaimed. Immortal kings were at the top of the pyramid in the immortal martial continent. It was rare to see them, just like how people in the mountains had never seen a car. It was very rare, and people exclaimed again and again. Is something big happening? From the speed at which they were rushing, they also felt a kind of suffocating urgency. Yes, at this time, racing for time was racing for life. Whether or not Jiang Xiu could be saved was not a matter of life and death. It was a matter of great importance. If he was really killed by the Reincarnation Palace, would the Chenqing school be able to tolerate this matter? If not, would they start a war? At this time, the entire immortal martial continent was probably already paying attention to this matter. Faster. Should we use the escape technique? Okay. Using the escape technique would consume a lot of magic power, and immortal kings were no exception. No matter who it was, as long as they tried their best to rush at the fastest speed, they would not be able to last long and would consume a lot of magic power. The news quickly spread to the Western Zhou nation. This time, the 75th Great Celestial Immortal on the killer list of the Reincarnation Palace, Wan Yunfei, and the third Immortal King, Fan Tian. When the news spread, the onlookers in the Western Zhou nation were also shocked. In public, Jiang Xiu was preparing to break through the realm. The two who came probably had no chance to escape. Only by breaking through the realm and becoming a great celestial immortal would they have a chance of survival. Fortunately, he already had the resources to break through to the great celestial immortal realm. Although the blood of the true netherworld water and the earth dragon fire snake were harmful, he could not care so much at the moment. Life and death depended on this. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.